Hello, and thanks for tuning in to another Unidentified Celebrity Review. Things will kick off in just a few minutes, but first, how was your weekend? It was a holiday weekend here in America, our Independence Day. I celebrated the old-fashioned way of eating hot dogs and watching fireworks. I hope you all had similarly fun weekends. It's like we got 26 of you in the chat. That's always awesome. Case for Infinity, Alpha Beta, Kev D. Really great to see you all. You know, perhaps unsurprisingly, there's more UFO sightings reported on July 4th than any other day. You know, I'm not entirely sure if it's just misidentified fireworks or maybe aliens are using the aerial explosions to cover their more blatant actions. You know, something else happened yesterday, something that we can all celebrate. We owe this one to Australia. Yeah, despite telling investigators that all government records pertaining to UFOs were lost or destroyed, yesterday the Australian National Archives declassified just that. A previously classified 1971 document is now available for our viewing. You know, I totally haven't digested it yet, but it includes reports of totally bizarre sightings. UFOs with cat-faced alien occupants and rabbit-stealing dwarfs. Most of this seems to be evidence collected without, you know, not real evidence, but just stories collected. But it does make one thing clear. The Australian government, or some contingent within, they were convinced that UFOs were real and that they were alien. Another big media item for the UFO community was dropped this weekend. Controversial figure Steven Greer dropped his cosmic hoax video on YouTube. There were some punches thrown, and I certainly don't agree with all of it, but it did make some valid points. There'll be some great guests coming in on the second half of the show to talk about that and more. But in this first hour, we're going to take a step back. You know, it can be easy to focus on the tree and miss the forest. Our first guest, Pete from the Creepy Little Book YouTube channel, will help us see the forest. And Timmy E, are you watching? I hope so. You gave us a super chat towards the end of the show on Friday, asking about the epistemological, religious, and philosophical aspects of the phenomenon. Now, I'm sorry we didn't get to answer it then, but I think you'll get your answer today. And thanks for the donation. It goes a long ways towards increasing the production value over here and helping to ensure that this show continues to grow. You know, hitting that thumbs up button, engaging with the live chat, and sharing the show with others are also great ways of helping out. And, you know, again, thanks for being here. It really is a great community that surrounds these shows. And of course, there's two people who are key to it all, building a big tent for us all to gather, talk, and have some fun. Your hosts of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, Luis Jimenez and Michael Mataluni.
Well, hello, rather. How was your 4th of July weekend, buddy?
That was great. Had some good weather, some good hot dogs, and lots of fireworks.
Good. Well, that sounds like a pretty successful 4th of July to me. Michael, Indeed. How was yours?
Pretty much the same. I actually got to take the kids to a soccer game on Sunday, came home and launched some fireworks ourselves. We usually, we haven't gotten fireworks in a while, but my son just wanted to blow some shit up. And so my wife and my daughter were shocked at how every time we blew some shit up, how we would giggle like schoolboys. And apparently women, specifically my wife and my daughter, do not get it at all.
Yeah, no, it runs in the blood. It's something that I don't know what it is. I'm not into explosions, but when I see fire and explosions, I'm like, what? Like that would happen in my. I walked out yesterday, took out the garbage, and there was like Los Angeles is just rife with illegal fireworks. I don't know where people get them. I mean, like dangerous stuff. And I walked out there, guy, boom, like, boom. It's like that's cool.
I don't know.
It's like I'll sit here and watch a couple more of those, and then I was like, all right, I'll go.
Did you see Bob Lazar and Jeremy Corbell with their drone firework fight?
I did. Yes. I did see it. Yeah. It was funny. It was fun. It looked like they had a good time for sure. I mean, that's hilarious that Bob Lazar just knows how to make fireworks. Of course he does.
Of course he does.
Of course he does. All right, rather. Well, thank you for the introduction. We'll see you in a couple. Probably the second hour.
Sounds good. See you there.
All right, buddy. Ciao. Hello. Good morning. Good evening. Good day. Good afternoon. And aloha. Welcome back to another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP and UFO. My name's Luis Jimenez, my co-host there, Mr. Michael Mataluni. Thank you for coming aboard and getting weird with us here on another episode. My show is brought to you by BlueMarlinChronicles.com, purveyors of the world's finest fishing tackle since 1995, and of course DOS Tapes, which provides all of the tunes you hear on the show. So check out their Bandcamp link in the description below. We have had a lot of stuff happen over the weekend. A lot of stuff drop, a lot of stuff to talk about, but we have a really, really special guest that I've been looking forward to having on the show for a while now. And yeah, don't forget to check out, of course, our links below, which have our Patreon, have ways to support the show. Remember, this is basically a public access channel. It's supported by viewers like you, so definitely check out ways to support the show. And Michael, is there? Oh, should I tell the folks? Well, I think I wrote it down in the show sheet. Who's coming up here in the next week? Oh,
in the next week.
Yeah.
Oh yes, would you like me to share that information?
Yeah, please.
I'd be happy to.
We've got
I'd be happy to.
Killer guests coming.
Do not
next week.
Forget to tune in this Wednesday here at the Unidentified Celebrity Review. We've got Bryant the Dragon Arnold stopping by to talk about last week's review of SWR and also help us review episode 9. Next week, we've got Grant Cameron, Richard Dolan, Melinda Leslie, Lou Elizondo, and his dad, and many, many, many more. So if you haven't clicked the little subscribe button below and hit the bell, just take control of your destiny. Do it now. You'll be happy.
Ring the bell. For sure, ring the bell. I mean, dude, we got Richard Dolan and Grant Cameron with Belinda Leslie in one episode. Same episode. And then we're actually going to be, I think we're going to do it on the 15th, which is a Thursday, right before your show. We're going to be having Lou Elizondo with his dad, my dad.
That's amazing.
And me. And we're going to be having a very interesting conversation. So definitely come by and check that out. That's going to be on the 15th. So next Thursday.
That's going to be amazing. And then tomorrow on Singularity Lab, we have head science writer at the Debrief, Christopher Plain, joining us. He's got some interesting perspective into whether or not the U.S. is lying to us about UFOs. So we'll take a look into that. And then on Thursday, we've got another amazing show, Mark Sokol. He's actually developing an anti-gravity instruments, and he's developing a warp detector to see if we can track warp signatures in our own galaxy. So my goodness, if you haven't subscribed to the Singularity Lab, make sure you click the link below and subscribe and click the bell over there so you get notified on Tuesday and Thursday.
All right.
We got an amazing guest today.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, my God. For those of you who don't know, Pete is a master of mystery and anti-Aquarian of the arcane, or perhaps just a weirdo yelling in the dark, a student of the bizarre and a dedicated researcher into the strange. He has invested the last 30 years of his life to investigating the unknown. He's the host of The Creepy Little Book, a show with a focus on the fringe, everything from the esoteric to the extraterrestrial, the spiritual to the supernatural, and all that lies in between. You can find him 7 nights a week, 365 days a year, live on YouTube, or catch the replay podcast on Spotify or wherever you find great podcasts. Ladies and gentlemen, Pete.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh man, the pleasure is all ours.
Certainly.
So dude, the thing that strikes me first of all about you is that you do a show 365 days a year.
That is
Every
correct.
single day, doesn't matter what holiday, what's going on. Pete is putting out a show, man. How do you do that?
I'm excited.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, I was gonna
That's what I'm
start
saying.
there. I mean, how is that possible? Because I know you've got kids, right?
I do.
You've
too.
got 4 cats. I learned last night.
That's right. 4 cats.
I'm sure you have a partner that you have to keep happy.
Yes. I got a lovely wife.
How do you do that, man?
Well, it's because I do it so late at night. Everybody's already
Yeah.
asleep. I really, inspired by Art Bell, I like to do my show very late for the night people, for the community of the curious that, sometimes can't sleep or has nowhere to be. It's a great place for people to come late at night. I mean, I don't do the show until 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so it's a good spot.
Yeah, well, dude, it's something that it's my absolute guilty pleasure.
Well, thank you
It's
so much.
because on this show we always try to keep it to the grounded, the scientific roots if we can, but we always do like to venture out into the fun part of this.
Oh, that's where I live, right in the fun part.
That's why I wanted you on the show, because we were talking on Carl Vibe's channel, and it was something that I think the question was, what would you like to be seen done at Skinwalker Ranch? And your answer to that question was, I think mine was something along the lines of, well, I just want to see some more science, repeatable data, da-da-da. And Pete's like, yeah, I want all that too, but I also want somebody to bring out the wizards.
Bring them out.
And I was like, wow, what a great answer. Like,
I'm
'cause I
pretty
think
sure.
you're
I'm
right.
pretty sure he did not say he wants that too. I'm pretty sure he just said, "I want the wizards."
Yeah, pretty much. I want the wizards. So
Well, you
it's
don't
so
send a
great.
scientist to do a wizard's job.
That's
Right.
yes.
Right.
That was
And
it.
I was like, wow, that's fascinating. I mean, I think both should be coming to the table, because it's like this idea. I love this example that somebody had used about the light bulb. And it was like, the light bulb didn't come from candle makers and people who knew how to make light. They're not the ones who were thinking outside of the, simple fire model. It was somebody thinking differently, somebody thinking of a different way to light up a room and read at night, without this archaic candle wax dripping all over the place, and it's just so stupid. And so boom, we get the light bulb. So I agree with you, man. I think especially when it comes to things like Skinwalker Ranch or very weird energy spots on the planet, that it can't just be science attacking it. There's also got to be either a spiritual element or a wizard, somebody who can bring a different fringe element to it. So I guess let's start there. I mean, like, how did you, I'd like to know, I'd like my audience to know sort of your background, because I find your background fascinating, especially the religious studies that you've done, and, and sort of how you were almost recruited into being a priest.
That's the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had 12 years of parochial schooling that really instilled in me an affinity for the fringe and bizarre. Being raised Catholic, you're haunted by all the angels and saints for the rest of your life. And there's so many bizarre stories of these people who were of great faith and manifested that faith in supernatural methods. You'll see stories of saints who bilocated or who levitated or who had prophecies of the future. And these ideas sparked a curiosity in me. And my mother, when I was very young, used to take me to the library every week because, I mean, it was the 80s. What else are you going to do?
Right.
So I got interested in a lot of books about the fringe topics, the UFOs, the Bermuda Triangle, Bigfoot, all that great stuff. And there were television programs like In Search Of or Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, Sightings, Unsolved Mysteries. All these things helped to cultivate this growing curiosity in a young me. So from an early age, I'd say from 10 on, I just devoted myself to studying all these weird and fringe topics. And it's been a lifelong passion of mine, something that I, manifest itself as the creepy little book. Mm-hmm. And I love to share this information with people. I love to entertain and educate. It's the source and summit of all I do.
I'm curious how your mom took this. Obviously, she was the one who got you into parochial school, and then instead of being really following the religious, you started to follow a bit of the anti-religious, a bit of the underground, the subterfuge, the dark in the light, if you will. How did she take that?
Well, my mom thinks all of this stuff is pretty bizarre. She thinks all this stuff is pretty bizarre. So it's not really her cup of tea. She's been very supportive of my work, but it's not something that she shares an interest in.
Right.
The aspect of the religious aspect of everything is still, it's a big part of my life where it influences a lot of my research. In fact, tonight I'll be talking about the third secret of Fatima on my show, inspired by people like Malachi Martin, who was a frequent guest on Coast to Coast AM. So, and that's another thing. I can't discount Coast to Coast AM for being a huge influence on what I do every night. Art Bell is a personal hero of mine. And I remember being riveted to the radio back in the 90s, hearing all kinds of strange stories like Mel's Hole, the Area 51 caller, J.C. Webster III, the enraged Christian lunatic who used to call up Art Bell and harass him for 25 years. I mean, it's been a long, strange trip to get to where I am now.
Yeah, no, Art Bell was a huge influence for me too. I remember listening to Stanton Friedman on Art Bell, and that was just gold for the ears. So as you're going through colloquial school, and I mean, are you expressing these interests to your priests as well? I mean, how is the school reacting to this as you're kind of like I'm sure you're probably curious and asking these questions like, well, wait a second, how did this saint go from here to here? You know, why is he levitating? All of these, you know, just very woo-woo things like, but or is there a different meaning to the writings, and where like it doesn't actually mean levitating? Maybe it just means they're reaching a higher level of intelligence, or you know, that's why I love listening to your show, because you can take these complicated biblical writings and translate them to a way that, you know, I can understand.
Well, I think in a way we are talking about supernatural manifestations of the divine. So anyone touched by the divine could experience these type of strange paranormal events. You know, I think about someone like St. Francis of Assisi, who's very famous. I mean, everybody's probably heard of St. Francis. You know, you see pictures of him with the animals and such. But he was the first saint to experience stigmata, much like Padre Pio, who was a famous 20th century priest who experienced the stigmata himself. So these kind of manifestations of the divine are esoteric in a lot of ways. You don't see them. It's not a matter of faith. Like, you don't need to believe they occurred for your immortal salvation. It's not a doctrine of the church, but they are in many cases recognized as being formal miracles. And we can't discount miracles when we talk about the supernatural. I mean, there is something to be said for the finger of God reaching down and touching this world and manifesting through all sorts of paranormal ways.
So I can't imagine. I'd love to see like your notebooks from like parochial school. Like, I'm sure like I'm sure your priests and the nuns they loved it.
Well, the creepy little book got its name from a leather-bound notebook that I carry. I use it to jot down all kinds of ideas or subjects for research. And when I was working the year before I started the channel, I just said, you know what, I'm going to sit down every day and dedicate myself to hardcore research on all these fringe topics. You know, I had already been passionate about it my whole life, but I needed to really buckle down and do as intensive research as possible. So I spent an entire year before I even laid one video down. Wow. Researching connections. It all started with the Cave of Kelpius here in Philadelphia. You know, and I started researching the Cave of Kelpius. It was a place where an alchemist who had came from Transylvania by way of Germany had settled with a millennial cult who believed the world was going to end in the woods of Philadelphia back in 1683.
Wow.
So from there, I traced the lineage of different alchemists who were well known in the colonies at the time. I traced their lineage back to England and Johann Boehm and other of these philosophers and esotericists who had kind of carried the flame of the forbidden information throughout the Renaissance and into the Enlightenment era. And that was pretty fascinating. It really opened a lot of vistas for me in the way of the occult meets the supernatural meets even the UFO phenomenon in some regards.
Right. Well, what is your favorite, I guess, mythological or biblical text that you when you read it, you're just like, Jesus, we either what is going on here, or this is just in like which one's your favorite?
Well, personally, I'm a big fan of the Gospel of Matthew, but when it comes down
Okay.
to pseudepigrapha, the stuff that's not accepted in the Bible, I have to go with the Book of Enoch. You know, these strange tales of fallen angels who came down to Mount Hermon, 200 in number, and made a secret pact to take human wives. And I think this parallels in a lot of ways the story of the Anunnaki, of some kind of outside influence that comes to Earth and interferes with our genetic lineage, somehow alters our DNA to create a new species of human being on the planet, known as the Nephilim, giants of old, these cannibalistic, evil creatures that should have never been. And according to the Book of Enoch, this was the very cause of the great deluge that inundated the earth to wipe out these evil giants that had spoiled creation. I also believe this was a time of high technology. When we talk about the time between the fall and the flood, we're talking about 1,600 years, give or take 65, and I believe these giants spread worldwide, as can be seen by the mound builders here in the North American continent. There were tales of giants. Even Abraham Lincoln spoke to these giants in a speech he gave at Niagara Falls. So I think this was a worldwide civilization that existed in an antediluvian world that may have possessed high technology. And I think that if any of that technology remains, it's likely at the bottom of the sea, covered under great mudslides. Who knows the radical earth changes that might have been caused by the flood, perhaps a pole shift. Perhaps the Nephilim were all imprisoned in ice down in Antarctica, waiting for the day of judgment to reemerge.
Damn,
Fuck,
dude.
man.
Yeah, do you get now why I'm always like, Jesus Christ, dude, this show is awesome, It's like, I'll go, after I walk, like, I'll work my, whatever, 15-hour day, and then I'm when I'm tired, dude, your show's the thing I put on to, like, go to sleep to, because just the pontifications that you have are just wonderful, and you can tell they're just drenched in research. So
no doubt.
So your favorite story essentially is a book of giants, is a story of giants. It is these race of giants that roam the earth, and I mean, how much knowledge do you think we lost in the burning of Alexandria?
Burning Alexandria, that's a touchy subject for me. I still get busted up about that. That's how you know a true bibliophile, when they're still worried about the Library of Alexandria. It's been lost for thousands of years.
Yeah.
I think the library contained a lot of information that may have, let's take into account the library burned a couple times. The first time was Caesar, who burned it by accident. But after that occurred, some of those books were taken to the Serapeum. And Serapeums were a place where the god Serapis was worshipped. And Serapis was a combination of Osiris and Apis, these Egyptian gods that had been kind of Hellenized by the Greeks. Greeks didn't like animal-headed gods, so they made everybody a person. Even after they came into contact with the Egyptians, they weren't cool with that. So, Mercury and Thoth become Hermes Trismegistus. Osiris and Apis become Serapis. So I think some of the information from the Library of Alexandria was held in the Serapeums until the Serapeums themselves were burned. And it's possible that it may have made its way into the Vatican's secret library as well. So there's a lot that was lost, and perhaps even some information that came from Atlantis. Who knows what was housed in the library? I mean, when we talk about this, we're speaking of a grand campus, a place where they were performing science and technology in an era that is bygone. It was a place where the Greeks could go to learn anatomy, because for the Greeks, doing an autopsy was considered taboo. But for the Egyptians, they had become masters of anatomy through mummification. So it was a really interesting idea to wonder what information may be forever gone since that library burned. But it is one of the saddest aspects of ancient history that I can think of.
Man, real quick. So you mentioned that your favorite Bible story is Matthew. Can you tell us why?
I think when we get to the part, I think Matthew 23 is the exact chapter where Jesus confronts the Pharisees, and he's like, "You are like a den of vipers, like whitewashed tombs on the outside, but inside full of filth." And I always really liked that rebuke. I thought it was really confrontational for Jesus to call out these Pharisees and Sadducees the way he did. But I really like Matthew's writing. I think it just speaks to me in a certain way that the other Gospels don't. But I think everybody might have a favorite Gospel once you flip through the 4 of them and find one that we really like. But for me, it's just always been Matthew.
Do you still go to church?
I have recently been going back to church because the pandemic. Obviously, we couldn't. But yeah, I made a confession a couple weeks ago. I popped into old St. Peter's and said hello.
Oh man, that's hilarious. Okay, well then, what are the stories? We've all heard of Ezekiel. And the wheel within the wheel, and the creature with, I believe it was 3 faces and winged.
Oh, they got 4 faces. 4 faces. An eagle, a man, an ox. And what was the 4th? It escapes me.
Totally
escapes me now. I'm stumped.
I thought it was 3 faces.
The 4 faces, and they moved in 4 directions without the wheels turning. There's also these, the Oraphim is one of the creatures that he saw, or the wheel within a wheel could have been an angel itself. The strange description of these creatures of being replete with many eyes and 6 pairs of wings and just being very fearful. Angels are scary things. That's why when they show up, the first thing they say is, don't be afraid, because they're terrifying to look at.
Huh.
That's so funny you mentioned that. My wife and I were talking about this the other day. We were talking about angels and like how everyone worships or like thinks so lovely thoughts about angels, and it's like if you read the Bible, angels are terrifying.
Absolutely terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And they all trace their lineage back to an ancient Persian myth of kind of these winged creatures. And that gets conflagrated in the Renaissance with artwork. And then we got this idea of beautiful angels with big pairs of wings. And, they're playing harps and such, and they're attending to saints. But in fact, they're terrifying. Their visage is just terrifying. We talk about seraphim or cherubim or these creatures that look like snakes with wings that attend the throne of God. There's very strange creatures in the Council of Heaven, and we talk about the Council of Heaven, comes straight from the Book of Job, where Satan wanders into heaven and he's like, hey, look at Job. He loves you, but give him to me and I'll make him curse your name. And in that council, we talk about the sons of God, little s, where these angelic celestial beings have been created just to minister to the throne of God.
I did find in the Wheel of Ezekiel, it is a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There we go.
So do you think there is any relationship between this idea? I can't remember who the congressman was that was interviewed by TMZ. He was like caught on camera by TMZ, and they were asking him about UFOs, and he's a congressional leader. And I guess I don't know if he was a Catholic or a Protestant or whatever, but one of the things he said was, yeah, we Christians know about UFOs. We know about the Ezekiel's wheel. What's your take on that?
Well, I've done this show. It's actually, we had Christina Gomez was on my channel as a guest. Friend of the show. Yeah. And we spoke about these UFOs in the Bible and these ancient UFO sightings that occurred in Egypt and Rome. And I think when we get down to the idea, was Ezekiel's wheel a manifestation of the divine, or was it a UFO? We open up a door for a great debate. Because if you're theologically minded, you're going to say, hey, this was a manifestation of God.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And if you're more inclined towards the UFO phenomenon, you're going to say this is clearly a craft. It landed. It had a loudspeaker on top with a voice booming out of it. It moved in ways that were hard to describe. It was nothing less than a craft from space. Now, I don't think it's impossible that someone in the Bible encountered a craft from space. It's how else would you conceptualize something like that when you have nothing to compare it to?
Right.
So it is possible that we are talking about something that came from another world, but essentially anything that comes from the celestial realm, if you will, is going to be from another world. And that kind of blurs the line between the idea of extraterrestrials, ultra-terrestrials, and an omniterrestrial,
Ooh, what's an omniterrestrial?
Yeah.
God.
Okay. Right.
Just
you're talking about something that's omniscient, omnipotent, eternal, unchanging, unmovable, just something that is of the earth, but is so ineffable that it is impossible for us to even conceptualize. The Gnostics had a word for it. They called it the Abraxas, the unknowable God, the ineffable an undescribable idea of God, something the human mind could never conceptualize.
Right. I think it's in the book of John where he talks about my my father has many rooms, I think is the idea. And that always inspired in me like this vast universe and multi-dimensional world that we're all inhabiting. And then we just live on this certain physical plane. So I always took a relationship there from that verse.
I think that's very likely. I don't limit the ability of creation to extend to other life forms and other worlds. And who knows how a divine being would manifest itself to these other worlds. We know from Judeo-Christian history that mankind is a fallen species, that something happened to break the relationship between man and the divine. The Bible tells us it was an apple. You know, something not necessarily an apple. Rather, the Bible doesn't say it was an apple. The Bible says it was a fruit. You know,
right.
Tradition says it was an apple. But it's a simplification of something that breaks the relationship between God and the divine. Until that time, it was very close. Something occurs, and creation is forever altered. For the Zoroastrians, it's a little different. For Zoroastrianism, which is the root of all monotheism, there was a creator god named Ahura Mazda who creates creation as a trap for an evil being named Ahriman or Angra Mainyu. And Angra Mainyu slips into creation and corrupts everything he touches. So winter, wolves, germs, all these things that are negative in the world comes from this evil force that slipped into creation. In Judeo-Christian belief, it was humanity's action that caused this fall to happen. But who's to suggest that creatures on another world are fallen at all? Perhaps God made an Eden on another planet, and these people did not betray their Lord and served God in their garden, never to be fallen creatures. Perhaps that would speak to why they're so incredibly advanced, and why they have craft that can travel these incredible distances across space and time if they are.
Ooh. Is that anything like, where do you fall in? Like, you're still a Catholic. Where do you fall in with this concept?
Well, I'll tell you what. It's like I say on my channel all the time. I don't believe in 85% of the stuff I talk about. Right. The 15% I do is effing crazy.
Okay, here we go. Now we're talking.
Okay, all right. So that's eventually where I wanted to get to. But let's go ahead. Let's reset the room before we get there. Because before we reset the room, I want to ask this question and then we'll reset and get into the 15%.
I'm dying to get to the 15%.
No, that's why I wanted him on the show. So this idea that Ancient Aliens throws out there. Do you watch that show and go,
I used to. I cut the cord.
What are you doing? What are you doing to my belief system here? What are you doing to this biblical text? Is it? Do you find it? How do you feel about the show? Like, is it something that you think they're kind of close to being right on something, or is it just a really terrible excuse to sort of
extrapolate and imagine?
Well, no, I was just say like overlook human ingenuity. You know, like this idea that maybe just humans are really smart, and maybe this isn't the first iteration of us. I mean, like, I'm curious to know also, like, how far back do you think the human race goes? Is it a lot farther than we're being told and sort of archaeology is leading on? Have there been different versions of us that have been wiped out and survived through the years with these few books and texts, and then those have been translated and passed on to the next generation and so on to a point where now, you know, we've got two different versions of the Bible. You got Judaism, you've got all these different religions that sort of all say the same things.
This is the question you asked before the reset?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, 1 minute. You got 1 minute.
1 minute.
Okay, so
as
far as Ancient Alien goes, I'm surprised it's still on. I can't believe they've been on as many years as they have. I'm a fan of Georgios Tsoukalos. I think a guy who started out as an editor of a bodybuilding magazine, who's gone on to become one of the most prominent faces in the UFO sphere. You got to respect that. It's just, it's well done. Well done.
Wait, did you say he was in a bodybuilding?
I believe he was the editor of a bodybuilding magazine for some time.
Huh. Interesting. I had no idea. Okay. All right.
You know,
but he's to go from there. Stuff. I mean, he is. Look, I'm not saying he's, I've seen his interview on Joe Rogan, and I thought it was like, pretty good. You know, obviously, I don't think he edits the show, just like, you know, a lot of folks
Right,
that have
right.
TV shows and things like that. But you know, at some point, I would like him to sort of pull a little rank and be like, yeah, maybe not make me look like I believe all of this stuff, you know, because he doesn't. He doesn't believe all of it. These are just theories that they're putting out there with a lot of question marks. They're not definitive statements, but the show edits it as if they are. Yeah, I just wanted to get your thoughts on it because, I mean, coming from such a knowledgeable place, I was just curious. You know, it's kind of like comedians who watch Saturday Night Live and they're like, "Yeah, I think I would have wrote this or I would have done that." You know, do you watch that show and kind of do the same thing where you're like, you know, they're so off on the religious text part of this, or the translation of this.
They do a lot of stretching, but I mean, you have to keep a show like that on the air. I mean, like they grasp at all kinds of various different topics to try to loop them into the UFO phenomenon.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to speak to is you spoke about religion and these different threads throughout religion having kind of the idea of truth. And that's something that I ascribe to a bit as well. There's a belief that came out of the Renaissance called the prisca theologia. Mm-hmm. And this idea speaks exactly to that each religion has a thread of truth. And if you pull this thread all the way back through the sands of time, you'll get back to its starting point, which is the truest, purest form of religion. Yeah. Now, for many of the Abrahamic faiths, they're going to trace it back to Abraham. I trace it back even a bit farther to Zoroaster. But Zoroastrianism is not a religion that accepts converts, nor is it a missionary religion that's looking to fill its ranks. You have to be born into it. So it is a faith that is dying out. But nonetheless, it's a fascination of mine when it comes to religious studies. I definitely find Zoroastrianism very fascinating. It has a lot of parallels to Christianity as well.
Yeah.
For those of you just joining us, we've got Pete from The Creepy Little Book. He's filling us in on his mastery of mystery and anti-Aquarian takes on the arcane, or perhaps just a weirdo yelling in the dark. A student of the bizarre and a dedicated researcher into the strange. He's invested 30 years of his life in order to understand the fringe and share it with you. So thank you so much, Pete, for being with us today. It's amazing to have you. For those of you who are going to stick around with us on Wednesday, we've got an amazing treat for you. We've got Bryant the Dragon Arnold stopping by to talk about last week's our review of SWR. That makes me a little nervous. And he's going to be breaking down episode number 9. So we're excited to have that. And then the following week, we've got Grant Cameron, Richard Dolan, Melinda Leslie, Lou Elizondo, and his dad, and much, much more. So if you are not subscribed to the Unidentified Celebrity Review, all you got to do is click the link below. Make sure you also click that bell so you get notified anytime we go live. If you want to check us out tomorrow at the Singularity Lab, we've got Christopher Plain joining us. He is the lead science and technology writer at The Debrief. He's going to be talking about his theory about how the U.S. is lying to us about UFOs. And then on Thursday, we've got Mark Sokol, who is currently inventing anti-gravity and a warp drive detector to look for techno-signatures throughout the galaxy. So we've got a hell of a week here between UCR and the Singularity Lab. All you got to do is click the link below for the Singularity Lab to hit subscribe and the bell so you can join us live anytime. Lou, why don't you break it down? What do you want to hear next from Mr. Pete?
Well, okay. So, our producer had a really good question, and then we're going to get to this 15%.
15%.
And also, just everybody, we also forgot to mention we're on Spotify now. So if you can't listen to us on YouTube Live, check out the Spotify link, or just search the Unidentified Celebrity Review on Spotify. We're up there, and the episodes are uploaded pretty much right after the show. So go check that out. My producer had a question, and it was, what
apocryphal.
That's a new word for me. What apocryphal books do you think provides the most value to the Judeo-Christian tradition?
That's a good one. So, a personal favorite of mine is The Conflict of Adam and Eve versus Satan. It is a very bleak take on the time after the fall and what happened to Adam and Eve in the time immediately after their expulsion from the garden. There's also the idea of Satan kind of tricking them again over and over, and they try to take their own lives. They go stand in rivers to try to wash off their sin. They take all these extraordinary measures to try to get right with God again, and they're unable to do so. And at each turn they take, Satan is there to confound them. So I think that one really stands out. There's apocryphal books of Moses. There's Gospels of Abraham. There's so many of these stories. I would recommend a book called The Super Gospel. You can get it on Amazon. It's a really great compilation of all these pseudepigraphal and apocryphal books. And they're all compiled into one big story that you can flip through and reference. But I definitely recommend that one. I just did the Book of Judas on my channel the other night. That one is a Gnostic text. Gnosticism, also another fascination of mine, this kind of breakaway sect of Christianity from the early days who believed that the physical world itself was evil, created by a creature known as the Demiurge or Yaldabaoth, which was an emanation of the divine Sophia, the spirit of wisdom, who descended from what is called the pleroma, or the fullness of God, into a lower estate, and in doing so split off and creates this Demiurge, who then creates the world thinking itself God. So the Demiurge, being flawed, creates a flawed world. The Demiurge also creates these servants for himself known as archons and aeons. These things are often associated with the idea of the prison planet, or our souls being trapped in a cycle of rebirth and death over and over again in this world. In Gnosticism, I think reincarnation is viewed as a bad thing. And these ideas have kind of been twisted and molded in the New Age era, and absorbed by some of these different New Age belief systems as well.
I love some of the comments in here, like, Satan is such a kidder. Classic Satan. Satan is such a dickhead. These are hilarious. Okay, so let me ask you this, Pete. What do you think God is? Is that $1 million question? What do you think God is? Is God, is it this all-knowing, all-being thing in the sky that we all have to answer questions to at a gate? Is it a creator on the level of, say, different kind of species or being, or maybe a type of civilization that reached the ultimate just singularity, I guess we could say?
Ooh, well done. Well done, boy.
I think God is ineffable. I just think it's something that we cannot comprehend. I think human beings try to. It's very easy to kind of take the route that some agnostics and atheists do, that God is a creation of mankind. But I think that it speaks to the human experience to see various cultures across time come up with this idea. It's not unique to a specific people. It's replete around the world. The idea of causation beyond the physical realm. So whether this happened because a caveman heard a banging in a cave when he was hiding from a storm and assumed it was a spirit, or, we take the route that it comes out of animism and then evolves into shamanism. And eventually, people go from worshiping things they can see, like birds and rocks and trees, to having an intermediary speak between them and God, which is the role of the shaman. And that develops into various different forms of paganism and polytheism that evolved in the ancient world. I think of the Hubal god. That was one that was worshipped in a place where they worship many idols. And, when you all boil it down, that's just something that theologians have just discussed for thousands of years. Like, what is God? It is it is the source and summit of everything. It is the prime mover, as Plato would have put it, the uncreated creator, somebody who snapped his fingers and everything came into existence. Let there be light is very much like the Big Bang, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
And I don't think that, I don't take the Bible literally in every instance. I think that some of it's figurative and some of it's literal, because it's a library of books. It's not just one story that you're supposed to read from the beginning to end. We're talking about something that was written over the course of thousands of years by hundreds of authors and compiled in 391 AD. The final compilation was 391 AD, but it starts with the Council of Nicaea in 325, where they start codifying the ideas of what would become dogmatic Christianity. And it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't until 391 that the whole thing was put together. And later on, of course, you would have Martin Luther come along, and Protestantism would take some of the books out. And I do recommend those people who are interested, if you've never read the Catholic Bible, it contains extra books that are not available in the Protestant one. Most predominant is the Book of Maccabees, which speaks about the Maccabees revolt, and that's where we get the story of Hanukkah from.
That's interesting. That's not included. I'm curious now that you say everything you just said, because we can ask you about the 15%. For those of you just joining us, if you've ever tuned into the Creepy Little Book, there is an extraordinary amount of research that goes into this show. I mean, just incredible. 365 days a year. You did research for at least a year before dropping your first video. But the things you talk about, obviously, you don't necessarily believe in every single one of them, but some of it you do believe. Can you share with us what it is that you do believe?
Well, I do believe there was a mother culture at one point, that something like Atlantis did exist, that there was a great civilization that sprung up in the ancient past, perhaps developed a significant level of technology and colonized the world. These people would have been responsible for some of the great monuments that we see around the planet. The pyramids, Stonehenge, Easter Islands, petroglyphs. I think that the proliferation of pyramids around the world speak to this culture. I don't think the Egyptians were the first people to build pyramids. I think the Atlanteans were. And I think the Atlantean colonization of different places around the world spread Atlantean ideas that would later be built upon in these different civilizations. So why do we have pyramids in Mexico the same way we have pyramids in Egypt? Right. Because there was some culture that spoke to both and spread this knowledge around the world. So I'm a big proponent of the idea of Atlantis. That's part of that 15% that I totally buy into. And I think Atlantis very well might have been sunk by the flood. I see in the chat, Teen Tomazuski. Yes, Teen Tomazuski's #1 moderator on my channel. I got to say thank you to her. But she points out the Hollow Earth. Yes, I'm also a big fan of the Hollow Earth theory. So yeah, I do love the Hollow Earth theory. I think that the idea of a civilization within the globe, perhaps Agartha, the idea of this king of the world, Sanat Kumara, that the Theosophists speak about, very fascinating stuff. The idea the Lemurians once existed on a great continent that was sunk, and they went to an underground city under Mount Shasta called Telos. That fascinates me as well. So the Hollow Earth stuff, really fun stuff. Really, I mean, it's kind of space opera,
Yeah,
but it kind of reminds me of the this whole ultra terrestrial or breakaway civilization or Wakanda hypothesis that we've been kicking around here when we're talking about UFOs. And one of the things that was so interesting that you said was, pyramids were being built in multiple places in the world at the same time, yet these there was no communication link between these civilizations. If you watch Ancient Aliens, they'll say, well, UFOs, you say, well, maybe Hollow Earth or Atlantis or Lemuria. And so there's this really interesting connecting bridge, this connecting tissue between all of that, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. I think that this is everything's connected. That is the one of the prime things I've discovered as I've been influenced by researching all this weird stuff. It's all connected. You start pulling threads, they're going to trace you back to all these different places. So look at somebody like George Van Tassel, for instance. George Van Tassel cooks up the idea of the Ashtar Galactic Command. This is back in the 50s, 1955, I think it was. And the Ashtar Galactic Command are intergalactic space cops that patrol our galaxy and the broader universe to defend and protect worlds like ours from negative species like reptilians or Zeta Reticulan Greys. And Van Tassel and other people of the contactee era, and all through the 50s and 60s, you had people who were contactees who met these benevolent space brothers who want us to disarm our nuclear weapons and want to bring us into a new era of spiritual enlightenment. These ideas are kind of co-opted by the Theosophical Society and broadened into the idea of these ascended masters. So Ashtar of the Galactic Command becomes an ascended master of Theosophy. Sanat Kumara of the Hollow Earth, ascended master of Theosophy. Lady Nada Afra, this is another one. I mean, you have this whole plethora of characters, Jesus Sananda, who populate this kind of new age idea inspired by Theosophy, co-opted by the UFO movement, all mixed into a big stew of crazy.
I love it so much.
Yeah, nah, dude, it's so fascinating. I mean, so like,
Oh.
because I've always been fascinated by the idea of Atlantis. And I always found it, at least when I was a kid, I was like, well, Atlantis had to have been in the Atlantic Ocean, right? I mean, it makes sense.
Exactly.
But I mean, like, how? I mean, I guess what do you think that looked like? I mean, did it look like what we see today, or I'm just trying to get a picture of like what was Atlantis? Like how far along? What kind of technology do you think we would have seen? Do you think they were doing things like moving stones, for example, with wave energies, as opposed to say a crane or something?
Some suggest that Atlantis was involved in some serious black magic, that there were dark magical forces at work on Atlantis. I don't discount the occult at all. I'm fascinated by it. Yeah. So when we talk about people who are engaging in whether or not these occult practices, are considered true or real, some say that the Atlanteans were not only messing with incredible technology, but also with incredible amounts of supernatural occult practice. So that may have led to their downfall. They may have sunk in the deluge of Noah's flood, which I kind of lean towards personally. I think Atlantis was probably wiped out in the worldwide flood. But I do think Atlantis
they were integral in the causation of that flood.
They very well could have been. They could have been messing with some kind of technology that led to that. If we take out the divine aspect of it.
Right.
But I do believe the Atlanteans were at least as advanced as the Romans in the peak of their civilization, if not more. Perhaps they had technology that we would today consider far advanced from what we have now. Now, we don't have any proof of that, but we can't even find the remains of Atlantis at this point.
Right.
So
Even and Plato was the first to write about Atlantis. Is that right?
Absolutely, yes. Plato wrote about Atlantis. He tells the story of Solon, who had been to Egypt and was told about Atlantis by the Egyptian priests. He said, "Oh, you Athenians, you have no idea of your history." It was the quote. And
that's fucking crazy.
Yeah, it was,
like, what did he know? What did he have access to? What other writings? Who's telling this story? Like, where is this coming from?
From the Egyptians. It came from the Egyptians,
Right.
And a lot of that information comes from the Egyptians. To digress even for a moment, I think that a figure like Pathagoras is somebody that stands out great. So when we talk about the 15%, let's talk about Pathagoras.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pythagoras, he's educated in all the wonders of the Egyptians. He travels to Ethiopia. He travels to Asia Minor. This man's a polymath. He's a genius.
Yeah.
And, who knows what wisdom he might have obtained in ancient Egypt? Who knows what wisdom the ancient Egyptians obtained? I mean, even a character like Moses. Moses was raised as the grandson of the Pharaoh.
Right.
So Moses would have been raised with all the occult knowledge of the Egyptian priests before leaving. Well, after he killed the guy and had to go on the lam, before he leaves the kingdom because he was a murderer. But Moses himself would have been well versed in all the ancient knowledge of the ancient Egyptians.
Well, I found it most fascinating that Moses was a complete badass. He killed so many people in this 40-year wandering of the desert. But he was just a brilliant, almost like a general. Am I wrong when I say that? Tactician?
Moses actually had a stutter. Moses had a stutter. And Moses was sent to go be a great orator with a stutter. Like there's a lot of these stories, you find Daniel in a lion's den, you find Joseph in a pit. Like God pulls people up from the pit rather than the pedestal. You know what I mean? And Moses was no exception. Moses was a murderer. Moses had to go on the lam. He lives a normal life for some number of years out here with a wife and a family, and then encounters the burning bush before he's sent off on his missionary work. Right. Moses did kill a lot of people with the plagues, obviously. Moses does also send his spies into the Holy Land. Here's where we encounter giants again. Moses, in, I believe, the Book of Numbers, sends his spies into the Holy Land ahead of them. And they come back and they're like, yo, we were like grasshoppers in their sight. There were giants in the land. So we speak to giants again because they were back around. Some must have survived the flood.
Yeah.
King Og of Bashan, or even the 5 giants David slayed. Goliath was just the first. David picks up 5 stones because Goliath had 4 other brothers.
Right.
And David and his men spent some time hunting down these giants of biblical times. So, when we talk about the idea of other species of humans existing on the earth, to bring it back to what we were speaking to earlier, even science tells us there were other species that existed on the earth. The newest discovery they made was this dragon man in China, who they think is another species of human that might have existed. Of course, there's Cro-Magnon man, Neanderthal. These people were humans, but not humans like us. Yeah. So even the fact that Homo sapiens shared the world with Neanderthal at one point means there were 2 species of humans on the planet. So why could there not have been more?
Right. I think there was another one, Homo floresiensis, was like the Hobbit type human.
Oh, those are the ones they found in New Zealand, right?
Yep. It's wild. There's so many different variations that they're still finding today. It's crazy.
Our producer had another question. He said, do you accept climate change as the reason for the decline of Maya and Indus civilization? And if not, what do you think happened there?
Oh, that's a good question. The climate could have had something to do with it. Obviously, whenever you have ecological changes, it's going to affect whatever civilization faces the ramifications of those changes. The Maya are interesting, and their history regarding how they kind of vanish from history completely. It's a shame, but I think the climate change very well could have something to do with it. I normally don't dwell on climate change, even as it pertains to our world today. I'm of the community belief that if the climate's changing here, I'd be curious to see how it's being affected by the cosmic energies as well. Does it have something to do with solar spots, or is climate changing on Venus and Mars as well as it's changing here on Earth? How much does human activity actually contribute to that, or how much of it is natural cycles? Obviously the climate was very different when the dinosaurs were here, and then was altered radically by the Ice Age. So that really had nothing to do with people at all. So I don't know how much people have to do with things these days, or that.
So dipping in a little bit more into this, this 15%. What other sort of things catch your eye and get your gears going when you start reading or researching it?
Well, I do love cryptozoology. I think there is a plethora of species out there that are probably thought to be extinct that might still exist. Tasmanian tiger is a good example of this. Bigfoot could be some kind of lowland North American primate that hasn't yet to be discovered. Personally, I think Bigfoot would probably be more like an orangutan than a 7-foot tall monkey man that we think of. Maybe Harry and the Hendersons him up. I think a lot of times fear makes the wolf look bigger. It's an old German proverb, that if you're afraid, the thing's going to be 10 feet taller than you actually saw the thing. So I think people who've run into Bigfoot probably ran into some kind of monkey, and were like, oh my God, it was 800 pounds and 10 feet tall. It was breaking through trees. Overestimation, I think, is an aspect of it as well. But there were creatures like that. Gigantopithecus was, a big, giant, 10-foot tall primate that existed in Asia Minor millions of years ago. Yeah. So there is precedent for these kind of creatures existing.
Do you think a little bit of going back to the giants that you were talking about, could it be a case of just exactly what you just said, this idea of exaggeration? Maybe these men, these like, for example, the Goliath that David slain, could it have been, just like their biggest warrior who happened to be 7 foot tall and 350 pounds, and he was just a massive man for the time?
I think maybe that's possible. There could have been descendants of these creatures, but when we talk about these Nephilim specifically, we're talking about something that was altered genetically, something that was not quite human because of their celestial parentage. So these angels say, let's take human wives. So they're part human, but because of that angelic aspect of their parentage, they're not quite human. So I think maybe you could have bloodlines of them that persisted till later on in the Bible. But when we're talking about the antediluvian creatures, I think these things were massive, 15, 20-foot tall monsters that ate people.
Shit, that's heavy. Would I mean I want to believe that, but then the analytical part of me is like, and maybe you have a good rebuttal for this, but I haven't seen any bones.
Oh, well, that's because the Smithsonian took them all and dumped them in the ocean.
You think that's what happened?
That's what happened. The Smithsonian's been covered up the
Wait,
giants.
wait, which part do you believe? Now, I want you to be clear. I want you to be clear about what, for those of you just joining us, of all the things that you talk about on your channel, you said you don't believe, you believe maybe 15% of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But so I'm curious about which part of this you believe.
So I think that, let's say it's 1885, and I just found a dinosaur skeleton in my backyard.
Okay.
Here comes the Smithsonian to help investigate. Then they take the dinosaur skeleton away and dump it in the ocean. I'm sorry, the giant skeleton, rather. I said dinosaur, I meant giant.
Okay.
So this is kind of par for the course when we talk about these giant encounters. Giants discovered, and you can find all these old clippings from newspapers. I recommend newspapers.com. It's a small subscription fee, but you can really blast your way through all kinds of old articles going back 150 years about these kind of things. So there's all these different stories about giant bones being discovered. And the first thing that happens is the Smithsonian comes out to investigate, and then the giant story is never heard of again. So there's been an accusation ever since these giants have been found that the Smithsonian has been involved in a cover-up to preserve Darwinianism and the idea of evolution.
Well, why would can you explain to me why that would be, why we can't have anomalies and still explain evolution through Darwinian thought?
Well, I don't know personally why we can't have these anomalies and explain, Darwinianism being involved with it as well. But that is the accusation that's leveled against the Smithsonian. Whether your mileage may vary on whether you believe it or not, but that's the accusation that's leveled against them, and it has been since these giants have been discovered.
That's interesting. And you don't think it has anything to do with some sort of subdued Christianity within the Smithsonian?
I don't think so. No.
Interesting. That's wild, man.
Yeah. That's the first time I've heard that.
Yeah.
Well, damn, dude. Okay. Well, I think we got time for one more sort of delve into this 15%.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share with us, Pete, as far as things that maybe people should look into, or some of the things again that strike you as, wow, this is true?
Well, I love the UFO phenomenon,
Sorry.
and I encourage everybody to investigate the UFO phenomenon as much as possible. I think that there's definitely something going on there. Personally, I've always leaned towards the idea that they were from another planet. If they're not, that's even scarier to me. Like if they're from Earth, if they have been coming from Earth this whole time, perhaps coming out of the hollow Earth, as some suggest, or living in a separate but parallel reality. Some people can conflate the idea of the Fae folk or elementals or ultra-terrestrials, that I've spoken to a few minutes ago. The ultra-terrestrial comes from Earth, but is not human. This is a non-human intelligence, perhaps non-corporeal. Maybe it has the ability to take on a form and shape, but things like leprechauns and goblins and all these creatures of folklore, I think were influenced by real creatures. Paracelsus in the alchemical eras of the Renaissance called them elementals. And I think this ties in to a big degree to the work of David Paulides and all these people that go missing in remote areas. Right. I think that the elementals explain that away quite a bit. If you look at Celtic mythology and the idea of people stumbling into the fairy world and losing time, there's cases of missing time, much like with the UFO abduction phenomenon. You encounter that specifically with stories of the Fae folk. So there could be some kind of connection between these two things. And it's like I said, I believe the occult and the UFO phenomenon might have some connection as well. Yeah. If you look back at the work of Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard when they were doing the Babylon working out in the Mojave Desert, this is right before the explosion of UFO flaps that occurred in 1947 and onward. So who knows if they opened up a gateway for these things to come through. Crowley himself was involved with speaking to a creature called Iwas, or Lamb, who dictated the book of the law to him. And his 1911 illustration of this creature looks very much like a Zeta Reticulum Gray, long before Betty and Barney Hill had ever described these things.
Right. No, I heard you talk about that on your show a couple of weeks ago. I was like, wow, that's cool. Damn, Pete. Yeah, I could talk to you forever, dude. I think you're just a really fun listen.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, dude. It's I'm a huge fan of the show, huge fan of your work, huge fan of the knowledge. Again, it's a guilty pleasure I love diving into. And my producer had one more question. And that was, he wanted to get your thoughts on the UAP report. Did you happen a chance to take a look at that?
I did. I checked it was just a scant 9 pages of that UAP report. And the day it dropped, I did my own show about it. Mm-hmm. And I think that what they did is, they classified these 5 different categories that they put these things in, from airborne clutter to natural phenomena like birds and ice crystals. But that 5th category was other. Mm-hmm. So that means they couldn't quantify in some regards what some of these things are. So they leave this catch-all open, other.
Yeah.
And I think that leaves the doorway open to fantastic possibilities. And we can really let our imaginations run wild with what that other might be. So in the end, I think the UAP report just said, hey, we need money.
Yeah.
It's really what it came down to. Oh, well, we need money because we don't have any standardized way of measuring these things, of quantifying these things, of studying these things. We need to come up with a standardization for studying the UAP phenomenon, and we need money to do it.
Yeah.
But I think it's a step in the right direction. It might not. It turned out to be a great big nothing burger. It was more than I expected. I thought we were going to get a report that was completely redacted with black marker all over it.
Yeah.
But
well, yeah, I think the admission that they need money is a great thing.
Yeah.
It means that they don't have the resources to really answer the question, and if they just had a little bit more, who knows?
I'd rather see them spend money on that than these foreign adventures.
Yep, this is true. I would also rather see our money spent on that as well. All right, well, Mr. Pete. You never use your last name, but I found out your last name.
Oh, it's McCarthy.
Okay, great.
Okay. I was like, should we not say it?
Should we not say it?
No, that's okay. I always use my real name.
It's kind of the first thing I found when I looked you up online.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, cool. So, Mr. P. McCarthy, creepy little book, dude. So listen, I've got ideas that I want to run by you, but I don't want to ask you about those ideas publicly because I don't want to put you on the spot to say yes to me. But dude, I want you to come back and give us creepy little monologues once a month or something.
I'd love
that.
to.
Oh,
It would be my honor and my pleasure.
Yes. Okay, we'll plan something here in the next couple of weeks, and I think
great.
it'll be a blast. Okay, Mr. Pete McCarthy, thank you so damn much for coming aboard and getting weird with us here on the Unidentified Celebrity Review. Guys, go check out Pete McCarthy's channel. It's called Creepy Little Book. It's on YouTube. We've put the links in the description below. I'll have Rather again put the link in the live chat now, so you guys can easily find it. Go subscribe. I'm telling you right now, it's one of the most fun channels I'm listening to right now. It's something that I'm always watching. I'm always there. Always listening.
That's right. Thank you.
Pete,
yeah,
are you slammed right now, or do you want to stick around for the second hour?
Oh, I can stick around. Yeah, I don't have to run.
Okay, cool. I mean, well, we're going to be talking about a movie. I'm not sure if you'd seen it, but we're going to be talking about the Steven Greer film.
Well, I can talk about Steven Greer and his awesome muscles.
Game on.
Yes. Awesome. All right, cool. So, Michael, let's reset the room. We've got another guest that'll be joining us here for the last hour, who I'm sure
he's here. He's in the back room right now.
We always love to clear the runway for this man, because he's always landing a big plane, and he needs the room. So I cannot wait to get his opinions on this flick. And then we've also got Rather coming in as well.
Absolutely. Thank you all for joining the Unidentified Celebrity Review. You've just been listening to Pete from Creepy Little Book. Make sure you go check out his YouTube channel, The Creepy Little Book. It is absolutely amazing. And joining us now, we're going to be discussing the new Steven Greer film that was released for free. Let's at least give him that. that. For as much flack as he gets for everything else in the world, let's give him that one. He did release it for free. Now, I do want to welcome. We've got an two amazing guests who are going to be popping in here to discuss the new Steven Greer film. The first one is a political analyst and host of Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C., 105.5 FM, and the YouTube channel by the same name. The one, the only, Jamarl Thomas.
What's going on? Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you great, man.
Fantastic. Are you doing?
I love to see you got a new sponsor there in Burger King.
I know, right? It was out here because our cameras are a little bit different, right? So it's like, all right, who are you hiding it from? Just bring it into the shot. Just own it. Be like, hey.
I love it. Well, now, if Burger King, if you're watching, you know who to go to. All right, who do we got next, Michael?
We've got another amazing guest for you. For those of you who are friends and fans of the show, you see him every day right here on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. He is the one, the only, Rather Be Squidding. He also is a huge fan of Mick West, and I just wanted to thank you so much for really bringing that to the table with your passion and your Coca-Cola. So thanks so much for joining us, Rather Be Squidding.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Dude, can we talk about that for a second? Actually, can we just re-review that debate? Because over the weekend, oh man, there's just been Kent was so hard on himself. And there was a lot of people that were really hard on Kent. It was weird because we took two polls of who was winning the debate. The first debate we took, it was Kent by I think like 54 to 46.
Yeah.
And then we did an exit poll, and Mick West had won the debate on the exit poll by I think 2%. So it was yeah. What do you got, Rather?
I think I kind of know what's going on here. Over the weekend, it occurred to me that I think that a lot of people who don't like Mick West don't actually dislike Mick West, but they dislike a lot of Mick West's fans. I had a Mick West fan post on one of my videos over the weekend saying that one of my recent videos was despicable and deplorable because I suggested that the Tic Tacs might be, something phenomenal. And so I think that a lot of people take what Mick West says and then really take it to the extreme. And I think that creates a lot of obvious pushback. And I think that might be a lot of what's kind of going on here.
Yeah, I think the other piece of it might have been, I think, Kent showed up with slides and he also had a lot of personal conviction and he was very upset with Mick West.
Yeah.
And that came through in his presentation. And I think that's what people felt like was a little unfair. But to Kent's, to kind of speak to Kent as well, he was bringing things that he specifically believed was tarnishing Mick West's reputation because Mick West is very inflammatory on Twitter. And I think ultimately what came out of that was stop being so inflammatory. But my position is the dude's marketing himself and he's getting everybody talking about it and riled up. We get people pissed off at us for bringing him on the show because they think we're giving him we're feeding his power.
Well, here's what I wanted to do, and I wish I had done this with Kent. Because I think what happens, and maybe Jamarl could talk to this a little bit, because I know it happened with me when I first met and had Mick West on the show. I was emotional, especially for the first 10 or 15 minutes. I tried to be as non-emotional as I could be, but there were the things that he says, and there are just moments that enraged me where you're basically insulting our U.S. fighter pilots. Like, how could you be saying this, and so you bring that energy to the interview and you come off as emotional and on the offense, and in some cases you come off a little too aggressive. Right. And because you want to get out your points to make sure that he articulates exactly what your complaint is. And then when he hits you with, yeah, that's reasonable, I think I could do that. It was like, oh, okay, but my next slide, and it's hard, and that's what I was trying to tell Ken, when Mick gave his excuse of, hey, look, I was on CNN. It was like a high pressure thing. We only had 3 minutes. I had to get my points across. And sure, yeah, maybe I was a little too definitive in the way I said it, but just know it wasn't my intention. And then this happened, the whole, this whole conversation that we had, and I kind of wanted to look at Kent and say, see, like, you can get nervous. And I think if Kent does the debate again, I guarantee you it's infinitely better.
Mhm.
Infinitely better, because
He's a smart dude.
He's a smart dude
And
He's
self-aware.
really and insanely self-aware. The fact that he was apologizing to people all weekend for his emotion, and I was just like, dude, you were keeping it together pretty decently, you know. Like, I wouldn't be so hard on yourself, but he sees where he made the mistakes. And I think it's a valuable lesson to learn, and also it gave a bunch of wonderful perspectives that people need to hear Mick West say. You know what I mean? Like, they need to hear him say, I don't believe that. That's my theory. Here's my scale. This is what I said. This was my context in the text that you're showing. You know, all of those things that Mick explained were, I think, impressed people. Like, oh, what's this? I mean, it's sitting here right now. If I took that poll again right now, I think people would overwhelmingly say Mick West won that debate. And it wasn't because the questions weren't good or anything like that. It was just the presentation of it, because he was nervous, he was excited, he was a little bit angry, you know, and he had this huge presentation that he might have even rehearsed, you know, like, I mean, it was planned out to the T. We didn't do anything that show. We were quiet pretty much the whole damn time, you know, like, so I loved it. And I think it's dialogue that needs to be had. But Jamarl, what do you think, man? What do you think about that idea that when you first approached Big West, that first interview is hard to regain some of those emotions? I mean, you're a journalist. You do this way better than all of us,
right? Yeah, it's a little different. I mean, we interview people all the time who make stuff up. So it's like part of our job is to pull that out of the person, if that makes sense. I don't see any issue with getting aggravated at somebody, but that just might be me. The issue becomes, honestly, my issue with Mick West is my issue with some political actors that come on the show. It's like reality doesn't seem to matter. And look, you guys have a different experience with Mick West. I didn't see the interview with him with the debate, and I didn't see the interview where he was, you know, reasonable. That wasn't my interview with Mick West. So, look, I don't have an issue with somebody being a skeptic. I just want honesty.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you're engaging something where it's like, okay, multiple people are seeing it, radar is seeing it, etc., and you know that there's classified information behind the scenes, then pretending like the video is the only thing there is, it's like, come on, dog, don't stop doing that. But look, everybody's experience is different, right?
Right.
I didn't see that. I mean, the person that you're talking about sounds reasonable. It's a reasonable skepticism, and I would applaud reasonable skepticism. So.
I'm sure Rather's got a smile on his face. What do you got?
I'd like to see Jamarl's interview. I'm going to go back and watch that because that sounds very fascinating. I think that he seems reasonable to me. I think that a lot of the disagreement comes from the ordering of the possibilities. It'd be great to have a debate kind of figuring out what those base assumptions are and why his ordering might be different than ours. But I think debating on the evidence, there's not a lot to disagree on.
Well, I mean, if we are talking about, look, I only need one case. I only need one. And if we are talking about, let's say, Fravors case, that is a hard case to eliminate. I mean, because you're basically talking about Fravor being sent there, meaning they got data. That's literal data from the machinery of things. I don't think that's a blip. I don't think the data's screwed up. They get there and multiple pallets, I think it's like 3, are seeing technology. They're seeing a craft. Right. Now, you could say that all of them are getting it wrong. All of them are seeing sunlight beaming in their eyes. But this is getting more and more difficult for me to believe, just because, meaning even if you say, okay, yes, there was something there, but we don't know if it was aliens. Fair enough. Let's just agree there's something there. It's that part. It's the order of magnitude that I'm stuck with okay, so the radar was a blip that accidentally just so happened to show up with people were there. There were multiple people, like 3 people, if not more. They're engaging this thing for multiple times, and yet they're just it becomes like, okay, dude, if you're trying to say that all of it is swamp gas, then yeah, I'm going to take a certain point of view because it seems on an order of magnitude ridiculous. I gave an example, my co-host, Shane. Shane watched that interview, and Shane was like, basically, what the hell is wrong with him? That was Shane's take. And Shane is not a UFO person at all. Shane's thing was like, wait, how are you saying that all of the people are getting this wrong? And it's like all of these people, like you're naming, it's not just one thing. That's my point. It's multiple things that are picking this stuff up and people are seeing it. It's not just hard data. It's also the human faculty. And he's like, yeah, all of them got it wrong. Meaning you have to explain that case. If it's one thing if you say, okay, well, the people got it wrong. Okay, well, yeah, but where were the radar hitting? Okay, well, the radar blipped off. Okay, so it's that. And it's like, you're having a conversation with him, and it's like his explanations don't make sense, as opposed to saying, I can't explain that. I just go, I'm okay with that. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
But that's I think maybe conversations that he probably had with you might be wearing on him, because he seemed to be breaking down some of those responses, and he had different answers when he talked on our show.
How about this real quick? Check this, Jamarl.
It says, Mick West, the way you approach any claim is with a preconceived notion. I wonder what is your most interesting unsolved mystery you couldn't debunk?
I'd say it's Fravor and Dietrich's encounter.
Because... Sorry, I just had to share that.
I love it.
That's honest.
Right?
Right.
I appreciate that. I have no issue with that. But that's my point, right? When we were talking, he should have just said that. Because look, it's an objective reality thing that I use to figure out, is this person being honest with me? And I do this in all of my interviews when I'm talking to somebody. There's certain facts that's like, okay, can we agree on some base level of reality? And it's like, if we can't, then it's like, oh, dude, I don't know. It's like, somebody is getting something wrong in this. I appreciate that. Honestly.
Well, I think. I'm sorry. I was going to say. I think he had his interview with you right before he had a conversation with Alex Dietrich, and I think that conversation with Alex Dietrich
wore on him.
Changed him. it had an impact on his thought process, because I think, in my opinion, she laid out the playbook on how to handle Mick West with his. I mean, she called it aggressive debunking.
Yeah,
and that's what it was. And now, ever since that conversation, and he's been on our show twice.
Wow.
And twice since that, he has. I mean, Rather, am I wrong when I'm saying this? Because Rather says he's been saying this the whole time, but I think his tone and his overall opinion on some of this is different. Rather, am I off on that?
You know, I think that he has always he's never claimed that he knew what one of these incidents are, and he's always kind of had that stacked choice ranking. But I think that you're right. I think he has softened his tone. You know, I think that he's not trying to be a opponent to all of this. I think that he is trying to get to the truth. And I think that shows like this and conversations like Jamarl's and ours, they all drive us towards each other. You know, it's a productive conversation.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think that after having that conversation with Mick West, and he having had that conversation with Alex Dietrich, and prior to that, he having had that conversation with Jamarl, I think we're slowly able to introduce the idea that just because you don't necessarily believe this video or you've debunked this video doesn't mean you can debunk the totality of the case. And I think that's where maybe he's starting to make a transition, make a little bit of a turn, because that's the thing that people are most upset about him, about that and his Twitter personality. They're upset that he'll go, not aliens, or it's like, well, wait a second, like, look at the totality of the data. You don't have all the data, yet you're making these assumptions. And that's exactly what Kent was trying to say as well.
I do want to say, though, to be fair, there are a lot of people on the opposite side of the spectrum, like, Jeremy Corbell and Luis Elizondo, who are perfectly happy to claim that it is aliens, right. And no one's jumping at their throats saying,
bullshit,
why?
Dude, I'm not, dude, we say on this show all the time, we do not know. And so getting more data. And
we do. I think that we love Elizondo more than we love Mick West as a general sentiment, though.
Well,
on
you
this. I think there's
maybe not
undeniably.
you. You love Mick West
That's me.
more for sure.
I love them both. I love them both. I think they're great.
I got to be honest. I don't know what it is. Like, and my argument is always you go to the degree that you can defend. But
Right.
I have a hard time. I think it's both, and I've said it on more than one occasion. I think we do have special tech or secret tech that can do phenomenal things, but I think it's both. I think like just based on the context of the evidence and thinking back to how far back this goes. I mean, the government has been alive for like 70, 80 years. And so it's like, when Marco Rubio comes out and says, our brave men and women, et cetera, he's basically underlining this kind of context of these people weren't lying. And in the context of they weren't lying, how far back does that go? Even if you say 50 years, oh my God. Like at a certain point, you have to say, okay, at what point did the technology start to exist and who could create it? And it's like, we're talking about the fall of the Soviet Union. We're talking about China not being up to the point yet. And it's like, whether it's us or not, it breaks our paradigm. Like like it's hard to, I don't understand why the left on some level doesn't get this. And to me, I've been walking around in this kind of befuddlement of like, oh my God, why didn't the world stop? Don't they get the gravity of what just happened? I mean, they put something on the table that literally breaks our paradigm. I mean, whether it's us or not, if it's secret tech or not, it still breaks our paradigm of physics. And I got to be honest, everybody is basically saying it's not us. Like when you're looking at Romney or you're listening to Rubio or NASA or what's the other guy? Ratcliffe. Yeah, I mean, all of these guys are basically saying, okay, it's not Russia or China, but we don't think it's aliens. It's like, okay, dude, you've taken everything off the table. You got to put something back on that table.
Right.
And so it's I don't know, man. It's very wild.
Speaking of technology, I mean, I guess it's a nice little segue into getting into this Steven Greer film. Which,
I just
by the
watched
way,
it. I just watched it.
I put a poll out at the top of the show, and let's see where the poll's at right now. So I put Steven Greer movie, good or not? 42% said yes, and then 58% said no.
Where do you fall on that?
Okay, let's dive into it. I hate days like this because they make me wake up and they make me go, what the fuck am I been doing for the last year? Because I'm glad I forced myself to watch this movie, but I've got issues with it. First of all, we have to accept this version of the truth from Steven Greer, who's a known hoaxer and liar. Fact. The second thing is the people that are sort of backing this up are Werner von Braun, who was a Nazi, and the Nazi's assistant.
Werner von Braun also got us to the moon, so.
Well, all of this is based on the assistant, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, like literally all of this is based on that. Like the entire framing, the entire base, like, because otherwise, where else is he getting it from?
Yeah.
Like, but keep going, because I have my own opinion.
Well,
my opinion is shocked.
Yeah. Well, what else I was thinking is the thing that I really also didn't like about it was Greer. I've never heard Greer pitch this in any other film that he's ever made. If this was a real fear, why is he doing it now? Like, why this idea of this cosmic hoax, this idea of this being a psyop, being a literal false flag operation on the American people. Like, he is claiming some pretty wild stuff.
Now, he's been claiming this for a while, though, to his credit.
But has he? I mean,
yeah,
I know he's been pushing the idea of, they're hiding this because of the energy. They don't want to give up the way the energy is produced because that would cut off the entire oil industry, and it would change, it would do this and it would do that, and they're being evil and they're hiding the tech. Hiding the tech was his thing. I've never heard him once say this is a cosmic false flag operation.
I'm telling you, go back and look at his stuff.
I mean, I could be wrong on this. I could be wrong on this.
when I got into the UFO stuff, Greer's people, like the interviews and stuff like that for serial disclosure, that was big. I mean, that was one of the things I went through to kind of get a context. He's pushed.
But I'm saying he's never made a whole film about it.
I've never seen him do a whole film about it.
That's what I mean. It wasn't at the forefront of his message. For the forefront of his message was CE5, being able to initiate this human contact.
Right here. Alien girl, unacknowledged.
But I mean, how long of the film was this warning? You know,
I don't know. I'm saying is it's something that he's been talking about for a while. It's not like a new.
No,
like,
and I'm okay.
Came out tomorrow.
Yeah, and look, if I'm wrong on that, then I'm wrong on that. I feel like he's never devoted a whole film. That I do know, and the messages that I got from a lot of his other films was more like I said, along the lines of making contact, why they're coming to us, the importance of why they're here, the technology, how it's hidden, And I think you're right. He probably definitely mentioned some sort of false flag type of situation, but it's just funny how much that's ramped up here in the last 6 to 8 months. Let's
give him the benefit, just to have this guy. I mean, man, we've given Mick West the benefit of the doubt, so I have to pay sympathy for the devil on this. Yeah. All right. So coming from a politics part, the U.S. does take a position of full spectrum dominance. That's true. Mm-hmm. In the context of full spectrum dominance, I can see a situation where people think we need world sovereignty, and they think, okay, we're doing this for the best interest of Earth, despite the fact that they're doing it for the best interest of themselves. Mm-hmm. So I can see that. I can see this notion of, let's say, an intelligent state in the way that these guys are coming out. I mean, all of these guys are spooks. I mean, this is stuff that I've said in my own thing, so I can't necessarily say, okay, Greer is entirely wrong with that. Mm-hmm. Just to set the context. All of those guys are spooks that are coming out. I don't know who Elizondo works for. And because I don't know who Elizondo works for, how do I know what he is doing and who he is doing it for? And I got to be honest, I've been freaked out on some level by all of this. Because if you think about it, somebody seems to be running a play. Do they know whether or not they're UFOs or not? I mean, aliens or not? And if they do know, then all of this on some level is being a play that's run for the public. Now, it could be for the best interests. It could be desensitize the public and let one report after another come, etc. But it does seem like somebody is running a play. I mean, Grant Cameron 5 years ago was like, you're going to get confirmation. 5 years ago, he said that. And it wasn't like Grant Cameron had magical powers. It was just the people who he was talking to. You can look at the Clinton leaks. And so it's like, it does seem like a context is being shaped. And the entire context is being shaped based on national security. Right. And so on some level, it's like, okay, at the very least, the basics of that seem to be true, because that's not something that Sheehan backs away from. And it's not something that even Elizondo necessarily backs away from, at least that basic context. Because like you say, Elizondo is out there saying they're aliens. And so is, the other people. And so it's like, okay, so if they know this, then the video wasn't released of something going Mach 5 and then making a right turn. The videos that were released were to give interest and curiosity, not to destroy a paradigm.
Right.
So it seems like a play is being run. The catch becomes, is that play being run for the purpose of a false flag? And that's where I fall off.
Right.
That loses me. Because I can see intelligence state. I can see that. I can see this notion of we're going to maintain dominance and everything else. I can see that. I can see neocons getting into this kind of headspace of defense. The catch becomes, why are they releasing this now? I have no idea, and that freaks me out.
Did Greer present any real data when it comes to his false flag narrative?
He didn't. No. All of this was basically just kind of like a logic thing based on security state, etc. No,
that's
everything
dangerous.
was based. Everything.
That sounds like that's Q logic, isn't it?
Maybe. Look, there's a context for this on some level. And even Sheehan, I don't think disagrees with at least the basic premise of, okay, a security state that's trying to maintain control and trying to shape a narrative. I don't even think he disagrees with that. I think the pride breaks down of, okay, this is going to turn into them turning into a false flag on the entirety of Earth, on Earth itself. And it's like, whoa, that's so big. That's so big. And it's like, okay, what do you have to show for that? Well, I have Werner von Braun's secretary. All right. Anything else?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. That's kind of that was kind of where I'm going with that,
And like,
man.
I don't mean to be brutal about it, right?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to be fair and saying,
Yeah.
okay, here's a part of this that I think is legit because it's just based on logic alone. I think it's legit. The other part is like, all right, dude, you made a massive leap from that. You made a massive leap. And I mean, the thing is, though, the people who are engaging in this stuff, right and wrong doesn't really apply, only cause and effect. And if it's something where there's a paradigm shift, how far does one go to shape a narrative or maintain control? Right. And that's where it gets like, it's hard to know what's in people's heads and how big people are willing to go. But God, man, you need more than just the secretary said this. Right. I mean, you have to more than that. It's too big, like for that. There's a few parts though. Managing the information. Yes, when people are leaking information, they are getting data from spooks. Now, this is no different than them getting data from spooks if it was somebody like leaking on Trump. It's like, okay, we're going to ding Trump on this because we don't like this policy that these guys are taking. The stuff that gets leaked is a way that media gets manipulated. And it's not even media gets manipulated. It's media working with intelligence in order to put that stuff out. Oftentimes, the people who are putting that stuff out is managed by definition. How could they not be? Here, you're going to have data. Here's context for the data. No, you can't release it only when we tell you to release it, and you can release it only when, in this particular increments. And so that's not wrong at all. The people who are releasing that data probably know more, probably can't say. The catch is what they know is probably spaced in lies and stuff like that. Like, I don't think they tell these guys the truth. I think they tell these guys some of the truth, but mix the stuff up in lies. But I'm making the point that the people who are releasing data and leaks, yes, you want the leaks. Yes, people like the videos. By the same token, you need to be clear that the people who are releasing that stuff are being managed. Mm-hmm. So when Jamarl Corbell goes on the thing, he's in a skit. And he's talking to Fox News, and he's like, oh, no, we don't know what they are. I mean, our brave men and women don't know what they are, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, well, why are you saying that? Are you saying that because that has to be the line that you take because of the data that you're given? Or do you actually believe that they don't know what they are? It's I don't know.
He doesn't believe that. That's for sure. Like he was just on Duncan Trussell's. Well, he was on Duncan Trussell's podcast, saying that his personal belief is that they have craft.
Yeah,
that's his personal belief. So when he says that the Navy doesn't know, I don't know if he believes that when he says it.
Right. So why is he saying that?
Right.
And is it because part of the deal, part of this arrangement is X and Y? And look, I'm not saying that as a negative per se. The only way for people to get information out like that for the leaks is to get them through leaks. Right. And so it's almost like it's part for the course. My issue with this, though, with that part is if there indeed is a play being run, who's running it and why and for what end? And that means that all of us on some level are part of that for some unknown ends. That freaks me out. Because all of it's so big. It's like the ramifications of what happens is profound. I mean, when Nick Pope goes on Fox and is screaming about aliens attacking America, that is insane. Like, that's so unhinged. And all of those people, for the first time, is dealing with this subject matter, is hearing Nick Pope, Ministry of Defense, basically saying aliens are attacking America. How do you unravel an individual when they get something like that in their heads and this kind of threat narrative that's being weaved? And
what's your opinion on the idea that this is Greer attempting to rile up the U.S. government with a false story that he knows is false in order to intimidate them into releasing more factual information?
Man, I don't know. I'm almost inclined to believe this is Greer seeking relevance. For that, and I know that's a brutal thing to say, but look, I got to be honest. I have a hard time placing what's real on this because everything is in the black,
right?
And on some level, the government is making that worse.
Yeah,
like this nonsense, or I can't say it's nonsense, but the stuff that Greer's saying gets that much more play. Like, honestly,
right.
I thought this video was pretty effective. Because he didn't go into aliens are eating, he didn't dwell on, okay, the government is using deformed people to scare the shit out of people and make them alien abductions. And it's like, dog, are you serious? But he has the guy sitting there saying that. And it's like, oh, that looks so bad. Meaning, you should have just left that out. If you're going to make an argument, that argument needs to be cut very specifically in regards to threat, intelligence. They're trying to do false flag. But he screws up his argument when he brings in stuff like that because it seems so outlandish.
Right.
The government is hiring deformed people to scare the shit out of other people and frame aliens. Yes, that's exactly what they're doing. It's like, okay, fair enough. What am I going to do with that? What am I going to do with that?
Exactly. Pete, you got any thoughts?
Well, I've heard these stories about the government hiring deformed people to kind of pull off the alien abduction scenario. I think that's pretty far-fetched. You know, as this kind of discussion's been going on, it reminds me of the idea of the Phantom airships of 1896. You know, obviously this predates the Wright brothers' first flight. So, you know, we have these things that show up on radar. Obviously, they've picked them up on footage from these nose cams on fighter jets and such. But the idea that this thing's been going on for a lot longer than 1947, a lot longer than Mount Rainier, goes back to these Phantom airships. It goes back to the Missouri crash of 1865, the Aurora crash of 1891. These things have been coming here for a very long time, but I doubt, very sincerely, that anybody in the government has any idea what they are.
Yeah.
I used to think there was a big cover-up, but at this point, I don't think the government could find its backside with both hands.
Well, it puts us in a weird spot, though, because the government has basically admitted, okay, yeah, UFOs are real. We've been lying for all of this time, but we're not going to tell you anything about it.
Yeah, that's
such a ludicrous position to put the public in. And I don't know if the public has fully internalized what the government has just put on the table.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, these things have been coming for a very long time. I mean, look, I am not overly concerned that I am going to be attacked by aliens. And so the threat narrative to me seems ludicrous, especially since they've been here for all of this time.
I agree with you there.
Yeah. And so it becomes like, all right, so the government, though, is still using a threat narrative. Also, by the way, the threat narrative could be wrong. Let's say the government is taking this thing of saying, okay, we have honest actors. We're just trying to find the details and everything else. Their threat narrative could be wrong. Their perspective is looking at this stuff like, oh, these things are around their military bases and our installations and et cetera. Well, that's because you're the government and that's where you are overly focused on. But if you take a subset, if they say, okay, what are all the sightings? What are all the interactions that people have? If you say, okay, what is that around the globe or even just in the United States? The military thing could be a minor subset of a larger interaction that is taking place in regards to sightings and everything else. They are looking at this like, hey, these things are around our nuclear facilities and that's where they are hanging around, et cetera, et cetera. They could be wrong. Like they're making all of these assumptions and these assumptions could be wrong. And so it's like, there's no other institution that gives information in this context though. It's all built around security. And that's where I think Greer's strongest argument is. It's this notion that the context, the framing of this is set around national security, as if that is, as if this is a threat. And
Alex, our producer, had a couple interesting points here in regards to three things that he did take from the Greer doc that made him think. And the one is the bloodthirst of the industrial military complex. Two is low trust confidence factor in all current and former government actors. And three is the fallacy that old evidence is not valid or noteworthy. And so that's the thing with Greer. Like he can bring in some very interesting and good points, but then he paints this whole narrative and it's like, it's the guy, was it Jazz the other day? It was like, anybody who tells you they know what's going on is full of shit. Turn around, walk away.
Turn around, walk away. Yeah.
But Greer, he knows it all. He knows it, right? It's like, oh, aliens are good, love and light. And it's like, okay, how do you know that? How do you know that? Like, and I'm not saying, because look, I don't know what the government knows. Like, and that's the problem. Where's the floor? I have no idea what the floor is. And I don't think anybody else does. And I think when they're giving people information and everything else, I think that a lot of the information is probably lies. I think that's why you end up with Tom DeLonge, the aliens are going to eat us. But Steven Greer and his spooks, aliens are love and light. It's like, how are you guys talking?
Yeah, no, well, see, this is
dramatically different information.
This is the biggest problem, right, that we have right now. And it's what makes Steven Greer so goddamn dangerous, in my opinion. And it's that our government can really needs to be way more honest with this shit.
Yes.
Way more
there.
honest. So we don't have a Steven Greer asking for money to make a movie, which, by the way, didn't cost him that much to make. All of the music in that movie was royalty-free music. I'm pretty sure you can find anywhere else. All of the stock footage, it's exactly that, stock footage. You could buy that off of a website. He maybe set up had one place where people came and did their interviews, and he had a couple other location spots for interviews. But I mean, maybe the budget for this film was $25,000 tops.
And by the way,
I mean,
Jack
that's
Valet.
high end. Yeah, and Jack Valet.
Jack Valet didn't participate in this movie. I
Right.
thought that was so weird. Did you notice that? So he puts a clip of Jack Valet and he keeps playing it. And he said,
Right.
well, we contacted Jack Valet and asked them about, airing this. And Jack Valet said no and got pissed off at our producers and said that the producers were the reason why he wouldn't produce the document.
Right.
And it's like, well, that's weird. So you're airing that Jack Valet disagreed with you. Like, I mean, your premise and your framing of what you were using and trying to take what he was saying and trying to frame it in a way that, to make it look as if he agreed with you. He disagreed with you. He wouldn't even come on your show. And he starts screaming or yelling at your producers, saying that you guys are responsible for it because you guys set up this threat narrative.
Well,
That's why you can't release it. I thought that was so weird.
Another thing that he was dishonest about was that, remember the Leslie Kane story he was saying, and how she was part of the disclosure movement project. He made it sound like she was the only person who left, and that's just not true. Everyone left that had a major connection to that Steven Greer SETI serious. I think it was serious. After that film was produced, everyone left. Every single person that was helping him left. So that's got to tell you something.
Yeah.
Like that. Even if his own team doesn't believe him, and he's got maybe one or two out of, I think he had a team of 20 or 30 people at some point that was helping him, produce these films and do the citizen hearings and all of that stuff. And then they all just leave him. They all leave him because he's a liar. He's a liar. But he's a liar. And just like any other great liar, 20% of the time he's going to sprinkle some truths in there that are just stone cold hard facts. And this is why our government needs to be more transparent with this shit. Because when I listened to Steven Greer do a film like this, and I found it cute how it was edited together. It was pretty sharp for a $25,000 production. But he's making money on this, whether he's giving it away for free or not. He's got his branding on the video. People are going to the website. People are downloading his app. Like, he's making money on the film a lot. First of all, he didn't put any of his own money into the film. That's number one. So I'd love to know how much money he raised to make this film versus what the production costs on it were. And then I would love to know how much money he's making post this film. But it frustrates the shit out of me. It's because I watched it and I said, damn it, man. There's some really great points in here that I can't verify because the government's not being honest with us. Yeah. Because go for it, rather.
Well, I think you can make all those points with Jeremy Corbell's videos too. I mean, I don't think that there's anything dangerous about this video or anything like that.
But the difference with Corbell's films, though, rather, and I think you'll agree, is at least the DOE and Susan Goff are verifying some of his videos, as actual things.
Well, so sure.
Whether or not they're UAP.
Well, I'd compare this to like the Bob Lazar documentary. That's pretty much unsubstantiated claims, kind of like all the evidence in this documentary were.
Right.
Which I think there's room for it. I found it interesting.
Look, it was definitely interesting. I found it a lot more entertaining than I thought I was, and I want to go back and watch it again to see what I missed. But it pissed me off because it's all we need is just a little bit more transparency, and a movie like this doesn't exist. And now you've got a whole bunch of confused people. And again, the optics on this are, I think, really bad for Elizondo when you've got his attorney
Yes.
in this film.
How weird is that?
It's so
How
weird.
is that?
It's so
and by the
weird.
way, Daniel Sheehan, in one of his interviews, I think this was like 2 weeks ago, I watched him and he said, I disagree with Greer's take on this notion of a false flag. He said, I agree with him in premise. He said, but they're working behind the scenes. We're trying to get Elizondo and Mellon and these guys to come on board and be more honest and push back with the government. But look, I don't agree with the whole false flag thing, even though he was very clear, unequivocal. And then in this film, it's the opposite. And it's like, okay, well, maybe he's doing the lawyer thing where he's like, well, I agree up to a point, except no, this sounded like he agreed. And so you have Elizondo, who is being called a disinformation agent and basically a spook and a disinformation agent setting up a false flag. Think of how profound that is. And then you have his attorney with him in the movie having this conversation. I mean, it's very bizarre. Very bizarre.
I thought the threat here. Go ahead, Pete.
I keep hearing false flag here. Whenever I hear false flag in relation to the UFO phenomenon, it takes me right to the idea of Project Bluebeam.
Yeah.
This idea of this false alien invasion. And I've always said personally, I don't think this is something that can be pulled off on a large scale like people speculate. I don't think this is going to be a worldwide kind of thing. You don't need to do something like that worldwide. You need one craft over one major city.
Right.
And you don't even need to do anything but park there for all the cameras to see.
Exactly.
You know, it doesn't need to be this giant production.
Yeah,
All
it doesn't need to be
if they
extreme.
are ours, we do have craft, if Bob Lazar was right, if they do have 9 spacecraft, if they did dig one up somewhere, reverse engineer it and create one of their own, all they need to do is park it in the sky over a major city, and that's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Then we're done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you there. But I mean, like the part that I loved about this was when he was doing that presentation, which I'm sure people had to pay $4,000 or $5,000 to sit in, and he had like these paper mache models, you know, and he's showing the models, and he's trying to explain the difference between what's a man-made craft versus what an actual possible spacecraft or whatever it is looks like. And I was listening to this, and I'm like, damn it, man, like this makes sense.
Yeah,
because
right there.
it doesn't. I will never on this show put it past human ingenuity and know-how for our government to have figured this out.
Exactly.
I will never do that. And until I am proven wrong on that, I will never, ever go against that. And
that's why I think it's us and not us. Because you only need a quirk of physics, right? Like, you know, a government lab figuring out, oh, this is how gravity can be manipulated with electricity. And you're off to the races. And it's like, do we believe that that's 20 years off? And would we be shocked if it's 25 years off? Like, how far ahead are these guys working on stuff? We knew the B-2 bomber and this other technology and stuff like that was like 20, 30 years. So I wouldn't be shocked by it. I think the issue, though, is this stuff goes back into like the 50s and the 40s and whatnot. So it's like, I'm not shocked if we come with a breakthrough. But to the other gentleman's point, he's right. I mean, even if it's one of our craft, then we've some special access project craft, we don't know any different. And the context, and that's the catch with Greer. And that's why you're right about the being more honest and transparent. Because the fact of the matter is, if they do have a craft, which I would say the public wouldn't necessarily be shocked by, but the context that media is pushing out is, this is the national security cat, this is national security. And like he says, you park it somewhere and people say, oh my God, the aliens are here. like right immediately. And if it does anything, if it attacks any city, oh my God. And so it's like the false flag thing, like you say, putting it past human ingenuity. No, but I don't know, man. I think it's us. And I think the Greer thing is problematic, to put it mildly, because like you said, 42% said, yeah, I agree with that. Why? Because like you said, there are elements of that are true.
Yeah.
Like that look.
And the danger. Well, I don't mean to cut you off. And the dangerous part about that is someone is going to say, "Well, that's true. So all of this is."
Right there, exactly.
And it's like, no, god damn it! All of this work we just did was, I mean, literally, Greer just took a Molotov cocktail and just went because he loves to watch the world burn, and he sees that his name is not in this historic moment that we're going through.
Do you think
and
he's
it
a true
pisses
believer?
him off?
Do you think he's a true believer, or do you think it's throwing the bomb? Like, because I got to be honest. Sometimes I don't know. Like Greer, I can't always tell. I mean, look. Either way, it's greatly problematic. You've had basically leaks, and not leaks, but releases over the course of 2 years, and you've had all of this work to get to the point of having a government report. And then an icon in the UFO industry basically says, yeah, all of that stuff is contributing to a false flag, and all the information you get is basically lies from spooks. So, yeah, congratulations.
No, but it's like, well, dude, it also, real quick, Kooky Nick saying for a $5 donation or New Zealand donation, it says, I wonder what Lou Elizondo thinks about Daniel Sheen in the Greer video. Isn't Daniel meant to be Lou's lawyer? And
you got him on next week, right?
Well,
yes, his lawyer.
We've got Lou coming on next week, but it's a Father's episode. Like, it's supposed to be, we're going to be talking about Cuba and with his dad and my dad. And I promised
you have to ask that question.
I promised him no UFO questions. But I did have a question. I did have a question for his dad regarding this whole UFO story, which I think will be a really great perspective to hear. But that was going to be the only question I had from him on that front. But we're going to have him back.
You know what you could do, Lou? You could prep your father with that question.
Maybe. Well, I mean, the cat's out of the bag.
You couldn't ask a UFO question. Nobody said anything with your dad.
Look, I think I'll be able to sneak maybe one or two in there, right? But I just, the whole point of the episode is to showcase that this man is a human being. He's got a father, you know what I mean? And I'd love to know I want to know how he grew up. I want to know, what kind of kid was he? What kind of student was he? What kind of adult has he become? Do you believe him? When he's putting his neck out on the line like this. I think those are perspectives that are really important to know because it puts a lot of context behind this, man. But the thing is, man, and until we have that episode, like in the back of my brain, I'm going, why is Lou's lawyer in this film? Why is Lou's lawyer in this film? It's so bizarre.
Did you notice how he thanked Jack Valet in the closing credits?
Yeah. Well, it's just Jacques Vallée had nothing to do with your film, dude. I don't. It's such a weird thank. Maybe it's because Paola Harris was in the film and they just wrote that book together.
But that's. I mean, it's weird for him to say Jack Valet basically was angry at us for what we were doing in regards to the whole hoax stuff. And yet he thanks him at the end of the film.
Yeah.
How weird is that? That's
so weird.
Here's something I don't doubt. Now, look, I used to be a musician, right? And I played in a punk rock band. And one thing about being involved in that kind of subculture is that everybody knew everybody. This band knew that band. And I don't think it's any different when we get into this kind of idea of this subculture that is the UFO research area. All these people know each other. Look at Contact in the Desert. It's all the same people all the time. Your George Norrie's, your Linda Moulton House. But let's look at somebody like Greer. Greer might be like Doty. He might be a disinformation agent at the end of the day.
And Doty was in the film. I'm sorry. I just had to say that.
Explain Doty to me, right? Because I'm sitting there with my wife and I'm like, that guy's so full of shit.
Yeah.
At the same time, even if Doty and Serpo and all the stuff that he fed Linda Moulton Howe was fake, even if Greer is full of baloney when he pulls out his little mummies that came from Peru, or he's meditating to make UFOs show up. The fact of the matter is that somewhere out there, there's some 12-year-old kid that used to be like me who sat down and watched this thing and became entranced with the ideas that were presented. So as far as whether or not, look at people like Van Tassel, Adamski, Truman Bethlehem, these contactees in the 50s. They were all full of shit. All of them. They were making stuff up whole cloth, but it set the groundwork for the mythology that's been built up around this UFO UAP phenomenon. Without it, we wouldn't have this rich tapestry of legend and lore. And whether you believe in all of it, whether you take stuff like, oh, Betty and Barney Hill, was this real? Did that really happen to them? You know, do we accept that? Do we throw away, Travis Walton? Do we say he was making it up, or Whitley Strieber? Where do we draw that line?
Yeah.
You know, when does it become fiction? When are we talking?
Please tell us, Pete. That's why you're here, to tell us where to draw the line.
Where is that line?
I believe all of it. No, like I said, I believe all of it. It doesn't fit into the 15% in all regards. You know.
Yeah.
But there is a great, rich tradition of mythology that's been built up around the UFOs, and that's what always fascinated me. And if Greer does anything to inspire someone to look into this deeper and search for the truth in it, and it leads to the next great researcher or the next great whistleblower to come out, then I don't think there's a negative there. As far as I'm concerned, the only real piece of shit in the whole UFO question is Stan Romanek. The rest of them might. Oh, Stan Romanek's a huge piece of shit.
He's a piece of garbage.
Wait, just real quick to back up your point. I am one of those people that Greer pushed. In real terms. I mean, like I said, when I first started, I went through all of this stuff, like headwind of aliens eating babies. Oh my God, there's a base on the ground. Oh my God, and then it's like, all right, that stuff, even if it's real, I don't need that.
Yeah, exactly. I don't need baby eating aliens in my life.
Yeah, right. And so it becomes okay. All right, what can you legitimately defend? It becomes that. But Greer, it's like when you're going through his contacts, he does have military contacts. He does have corporate contacts. That's the thing. That's the complication with him. Not everything is BS with him. And I don't know if it was different in the beginning. I don't know. But he has
I think I got a little. I think I got not insight, but I think I got a track on maybe why. So his first, I'd say 12 years, 15 years of his career, amazing. Probably some of the best, if not the best progressive work on this topic that's ever been done, honestly. To put all of the caliber of witnesses that he had at the National Press Club on the record, and all of them said, if Congress called me tomorrow, I would testify in front of Congress. That's how every single witness ended their story. Beautiful, amazing work. And in that work, he was talking to the Rockefellers. He was talking to John Podesta. He was getting donations and having meetings with some pretty powerful people.
Well, that's what I mean.
And then I think he's taking all of those experiences and all of those things and it's like a piece of butter on a slice of toast that's way too big. He's just spread the butter, and now we're at the point where it's like, dude, this is dry toast, and now you're chafing me. I don't like it. I just back off with the bullshit, dude, just for a minute. Because if he would concentrate on the 20% that I found, and this is being greedy, that I found, it's true. It rang true to me. But to flip what Pete says, and I always try, whether it's Bob Lazar, whether it's Jeremy Corbell, whether it's George Knapp, whether it's Gaddy Schwartz, whether it's Stephen Greenstreet, John Greenwald, doesn't matter. I always try to take the positive out of it, right? So on some level, Pete's right. Maybe it does inspire somebody. But my fear with it is in this day and time, where we've got the QAnon conspiracy theories. Nobody trusts our government or their representatives are representing. It's just feeds into this culture of mistrust and bad information. And then that leads into people going, oh, well, the eating babies at a pizza joint is real. It's for me, it's dangerous. And that's why I think it's incumbent upon our representatives to get these congressional hearings going as soon as humanly possible. Because narratives like when I think of false flag, I think of the Gulf of Tonkin. I think of something that is going to set the course of the world in a completely different direction.
Exactly.
And if you're going to claim false flag on something like this, you better have a lot more proof than
Some evidence,
something. But the problem is that's me. That's not everybody out there in this field. They're just not. They're not going to say, I need more. Just like we say it with Lou Elizondo and all of these guys that are giving us the story on this end. It's like, hey, this is compelling. This is insanely interesting. But we still, at the end of this, we need more. Right. It's the same thing with Greer, man. It's the exact same thing that you should be applying as far as a thought process to this story. It's, we need more data from you. If you're going to fucking call this a false flag information, that means in my mind, they're going to do some sort of terrorist attack with these vehicles.
Yes, that's what he's saying. That's his argument.
Burn down a whole fucking city or something and say it was aliens and we need the budget now. And then when we greenlight the budget 2 weeks later, we've got the vehicles. You know, like
Alex, your executive producer, he's saying that he doesn't produce a hypothesis. Actually, he does. Greer's hypothesis is they want to maintain dominion over Earth. And in trying to maintain dominion over Earth, they need something to galvanize the public into this kind of united front. I mean, honestly, though, the moment that you just see that maybe is the problem with his argument. Yes, he's talking about this kind of fascistic thing. But fact of the matter is, because of just the mechanics of it, the moment that you say they're aliens, oh man, you get the one world government regardless. It has to be that way. I don't even know how you get away from it.
I agree.
I mean, but it's like, what does the world look like in that transition?
Right.
Oh,
it's gonna be ugly.
That's
it's
ugly.
Unless we have a replicator.
Well,
no, you make a good point. You'd have to live in a post-scarcity world,
exactly,
to actually have this kind of united world government.
Yeah.
And look, most people, if you poll them, are going to look at a one world government as a bad thing.
Yes,
they're not going to. People like the idea of local governance, and look, governance is done from the ground up. It's not done from the top down.
Yeah.
It's not done from the top down.
The problem is
from the ground up. It's your local stuff that really counts.
Well, the problem is you're no longer dealing with countries. I mean, what does a country look like in the context of an alien civilization? And is the United States going to be engaging with an alien civilization, or is Earth going to? Meaning, the moment that one country engages, it's a war. It's going to be a red line. There's going to have to be some kind of body that goes above in order to negotiate and deal with either what they consider to be a threat, either to deal with this notion of how do you allocate resources for weaponry and all this other stuff. Like all this stuff just has to come into play. I mean, even if it's not initially one world government, it doesn't have to start that way. It's kind of like the European Union. It's going to be how many powers or how much power is going to be allocated to the organization to deal with what Earth considers at this point to be a potential threat. And does that get into the economy? Does that get into like technology in regards to what they're trying to produce and why they're trying to produce it and how much resources countries need to dedicate to the cause? No, I think that stuff just springs out of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, tell me if I'm wrong.
Well, yeah, I don't really believe that the...
Just say yes, rather he's wrong.
Well, so the assumption there is that the aliens actually care about us, right? Like, kind of what my kind of assumption.
No. The assumption has nothing to do with aliens. It has everything to do with our response to it.
But I mean,
you've never seen an alien for like 10, 50 years, 100 years. Never seen an alien. And yet, all of that stuff still takes place the moment that they declare, yes, it's not us.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily true. Unless, you know, if they come and the aliens are like, you know, park their spaceship above Washington, D.C., then yes, you know, we are like a one world government. But if they just say, hey, there are these aliens that are coming to us, we have no idea why they're here. They don't seem to have any interest in us. They don't seem to be a threat at all. They've been here for hundreds and hundreds of years. I don't think that changes anything.
But that's not the context that they're talking about this. The entire context is this is a national security threat.
Well, and I agree with Greer then. You know, I think that the premise of this movie, I agree with it, is that they've been here for hundreds of years. They clearly aren't a threat.
Yeah.
Why are we calling it a threat?
Well, I agree with
we all agree with that. I think we all agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with the premise of that. But I'm saying in the way, overt reality, just in the way that they're talking about it. They've put somebody on for the UAP task force. They're correlating all of this data and information, and the lens that they're looking at this is entirely through national security. This is a potential national security threat. Nick Pope goes on, aliens attacked America. Somebody else goes on Fox News. These guys are invading our military installations. They are invading our space. Marco Rubio. These guys are clearly a threat. I mean, after all, they're in our military installations. Or Ratcliffe. We can't defend against all of this stuff is defense.
Well, I think that was the build-up to the report. I think there was a lot of the threat narrative, thinking that they're going to say that these are a threat to us. But I think the report actually said the opposite. It said that, these others, we don't think that they're any threat at all. They think that they're a threat if they turned out to be foreign adversarial systems. But if they're just pure others, the UAP task force seems to not care. And, people who've read the report, like Mitt Romney, after he read this report, he's saying the same thing, that, these aren't threats.
I haven't heard the threat narrative go away. And I don't read the report the same way you do. I mean, even in the top, it says these things can be a national security threat. I can pull up the report if you give me a moment.
And I thought, one of the most interesting parts of Greer's film was Sheehan talking about the threat narrative and Elizondo. And his claim with Elizondo was that Sheehan says that he talked to Elizondo and Mellon secretly, and they both admit that these aliens or UAP pose no threat, but they are just, trying to make it seem like there's a threat because they think that Congress will only act on the issue if they think it's a threat. And Congress will only act on the issue if they think it's a threat because their constituents will only fund them and support this if they think that there's a threat over their heads. So that's kind of how they all think the threat narrative is kept on going. And maybe there's value to that. Yeah, I don't know.
That's the way Sheehan recounts it. I'm not sure. I mean, like I said, I think all of these guys are lying on some level. And I don't mean it poorly. I just mean, I think the way that they had information when they're talking to people and they're giving information out, either leaks or anything else, is just coded in lies. I don't know how much Sheehan knows. I don't know how much Elizondo, provides. But yeah, that's the way that Sheehan describes it. Look, I don't know if that's the end goal, though. I mean, we are making assumptions about all of this because we don't really know. I mean, even from the standpoint of Elizondo and his actions and why he's, why this stuff is coming out now and all that stuff is just in the dark. And so I don't take
Yeah, no, we're just playing music because we're wrapping up. But keep going, Jamarl.
Oh, my bad.
No, you're good.
Jamarl, you got
Oscar,
bro.
You just got Oscar. No, you didn't get Oscar. We would never Oscar you, Jamarl. No,
we can do it right now.
No, that's not what this was, man. That's not what that was. Don't do that.
50 minutes song, so go ahead.
Their guys is like, all right, wrap it up, and move their pushing out the stage.
Well, look, here's what I will say in the defense of calling it a threat, and I think we'll end it here. When we read it last week on the show, the Navy secretary said that these reports came across the desk, right? But the problem is that we were dealing with civil war in South Africa. We're dealing with Iran. We're dealing with North Korea actually talking about dropping a nuclear weapon. And then we got these UAPs who, in his words, described them being showing playful maneuvers. There was nothing threatening about them whatsoever. So the priority of trying to put resources toward figuring out what it was had to go to North Korea, had to go to the civil war in South Africa. So, and also, I'll say, if you're somebody who's trying to get a budget approved and you got to go through somebody to get that budget approved, and you walk into that office with, hey, I want to get this budget approved for UFOs. We're seeing them over our nuclear bases. You probably will get laughed at out of the room. But if you go into that same room and you say, hey, we have a threat over our nuclear bases and their unidentified aerial phenomena, you might get that budget approved. So that would be my only defense, if there was a defense of calling it a threat or sort of pushing that narrative, is that it's getting the asses moving of senators and congressmen, because they know eventually they're going to have to answer to the constituency of what the hell's going on. So that's what
I feel you. But I
Yeah.
think the problem is, how do you control that going forward? And
Right.
can you pull that back? And I don't buy that
Right.
you can pull that back. And I don't buy the political actors are just going to kind of.
Well, the one thing they
Rub it off.
did do, though, is they changed the name of the program from Aerospace Threat Identification Program. The word threat was in the task
Yeah.
force,
Yeah.
and they took it out. And now they call it the UAP Task Force.
Yeah.
So to me, that was a clear indication, oh shit, either we messed up the name of this because people think, because look, we're all traumatized from threat narratives.
Yeah.
I mean, since the day I was born, Russians, Iraq, 9/11,
WMDs,
Afghanistan, WMDs. It's always this narrative. So when I hear threat, when it comes to UAPs, my alarm bells start going off and it starts pissing me off. And I think that's why they changed the name of the task force, because they knew that's exactly where people's minds were going to go. But anyway, guys, we got to wrap this up. Honestly, I could talk to you guys forever. This is such a damn fascinating conversation. We blew
Amazing
through our
panel.
second reset. Amazing panel. So Jamarl, maybe you could come back on Friday, dude, because I wanna keep talking about this film, and there's still news that we haven't even hit yet.
Yeah.
So if you're available Friday, I'll hit you up. You can let me know.
Yeah. Friday might be that might be doable.
All right, my dudes. Let's wrap this up. Michael, do you want to outro everybody?
Absolutely. For those of you who watched the first hour of our show today, we have the amazing, the extraordinary Pete from the I forgot the name. It's
Creepy
the-
Little Book.
Creepy Little Book. I was gonna say Green Little Book, and I couldn't fix it in my brain in time. Make sure you go check out the Creepy Little Book. He does this show 365 days a year,
So good.
every single night. If you love Art Bell, if you love the idea of exploring the fringe and the fascinating, the extraordinary and the supernatural, make sure you go follow Pete at the Creepy Little Book. He's absolutely amazing. Anywhere else people should follow you, Pete?
Oh, you can find me on Spotify. You can find me on Spreaker. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. It's Creepy Little Book everywhere. So if you're looking for me, just type in Creepy Little Book, and that'll be me.
And you've got a show tonight, right?
That's right. At 1
are you
a.m.
doing
Eastern
tonight?
Standard Time, we're going to be talking about the secrets of Fatima.
Love it.
Ooh,
All right, my dude. Well,
yeah.
I cannot wait to have you back on the show.
I can't
it
wait
was
to come back. Thank
it was
you.
such a fun time, and we'll see you soon, my friend.
Thank you so much. See you guys
Thank you.
later.
Ciao.
Thank you, brother. Amazing. For those of you who are absolutely fascinated by our filibuster in chief, Jamarl Thomas is a political analyst and a host of Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C., 105.5 FM, and the YouTube channel by the same name, the one, the only Jamarl Thomas. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure having you, Jamarl. Anywhere
guys.
else people can find you?
Well, I'm on Twitter, at the Prague Soapbox, and yeah, YouTube. So.
Awesome, Jamarl. We'll hopefully see you Friday, my friend. I always love when you're here. And by the way, Pete, you're still in the back room. Christina Gomez says hello and sends her love. And we'll see you. Like I said, hopefully we'll see you Friday, dude.
Yeah. Thank you. Tell her thank you. I love her work, by the way. I follow her,
She's on. We're going to pitch Christina in a second because she's on Jimmy Church tonight.
At 7
Oh,
o'clock
interesting.
in an
Yeah.
hour. In an
Yeah,
hour, she's going to be on. So that's good. We got to. Well, we just kind of did. But we'll do it again.
We'll do it again.
All right, Jamarl.
Thanks
I'd
so
like
much.
to thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Later. Amazing. For those of you who are living under a rock and you don't watch this show from the very beginning, sometimes we go live pretty much every single day, 5 minutes early. And in that 5 minutes, you've got the extraordinary wit of the one, the only Rather Be Squidding. He's a UFO enthusiast and researcher. His YouTube channel, Rather Be Squidding, focuses on cutting edge science, technology, and UAP news. Rather, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here today. You are the man.
Thanks, guys. Great being here.
Rather, do we know when the next? Rather, what's the name of that? What's the name of that? What's that? What? Oh no, seriously though. Rather, seriously, do you have another?
Harvey Levin, tune in next week. Rather Be Squidding. I'm reading a book on creating baby universes. So if you ever wanted to meet God, check in next week.
There you go. That's what I wanted. All right, what was that attorney's name?
Baby Universe.
Harvey Levin.
All right,
There you go. Beautiful.
That's what I wanted. Okay.
There it is.
Wow, great show. A lot of fun, man. Honestly, that second hour flew. We're going to break down the Steven Greer film some more, maybe on Friday. There's a bunch of stuff we didn't talk about. Michael's still got to
I have
see
something
the
on
second
that
half. Yeah,
too. Christopher Wolford is doing they're breaking down the Greer tomorrow on Twitter Spaces at 1 p.m. Eastern,
go.
and they have a special guest that might blow your mind. So make sure you follow Christopher Wolford on that. And then tonight we've got the extraordinary, the wonderful, the amazing Christina Gomez on Jimmy Church in less than 40 minutes or so, 50 minutes.
She's going on at 7:00. Jimmy Church. It's a great platform. It's a big platform. It's a big show for her.
Yeah.
I'm so proud. We're gonna be there in the chat room.
Proud little papas.
We're proud little. I'm not gonna call her Papa. I mean, she works her ass off, man. She got on there
absolutely.
on her own.
Absolutely.
But we just like to sit back and watch in awe as the meteor rises with Christina Gomez. So all of that out of the way, you guys. Thank you so much. Before we go, of course, the show's sponsored by BlueMarlinChronicles.com, purveyors of the world's finest fishing town. Where did my music go, Rather. Oh, okay. It's just taking a second. Okay, there we go. There you go. DJ Rather. Thank you to the sponsor, Blue Marlin Chronicles. Their link is in the description below. Also, DOS Tapes. They provide all of the tunes that you hear on the show. Their Bandcamp link is also not playing. What is happening, Rather? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Look at his face. He's so nervous. Okay. With all of that out of the way, you guys, thank you so much for stopping by another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP and UFO. My name's Luis Jimenez. Until next time, you guys, stay safe out there. Peace.